Is there an announcement coming? Is there an announcement coming?
Good afternoon, everyone. The Sacramento City Council will please come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Thank you. Councilmember Kaplan. Here. Councilmember Talamantes. Here. Councilmember Valenzuela.
Here.
Councilmember Maple.
Here.
Vice Mayor Guerra.
Here.
Councilmember Jennings.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vang.
I am here.
We expect Councilmember Laloe momentarily, and Mayor Steinberg.
Thank you. I am here. Councilmember Talamantes, again, would you please lead us in the land acknowledgement and the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please rise for the opening acknowledgments in honor of Sacramento's indigenous people and tribal lands. To the original people of this land, the Nisenan people, the Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, Powhatan Wintus peoples, and the people of the Wilton Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. May we acknowledge and honor the Native people who came before us and still walk beside us today on these ancestral lands by choosing to gather together today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's indigenous people's history, contributions, and lives. Thank you. Salute, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you so much, Councilmember Talamantes. Members, we have a packed agenda this evening. I want to welcome all of you, members of the public, my colleagues, and the city staff. We have no report out of closed session, I assume, Madam City Attorney?
We don't, Your Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Then let us begin. We don't have any special presentations tonight. So let us begin with the consent calendar and ask whether there are any items that members 1 through 13 would like to be heard separately, discussed separately, voted on separately, continued.
Just quick comment on items
8 and 9. Okay. Anybody else? Nobody else. Do we? The consent calendar's been moved and seconded. Do we have public testimony?
So, Mayor, we have no public testimony for the consent calendar. I do have a read to the record. Item 12, a supplemental was posted to the agenda, but that item was withdrawn.
Okay. Right. That was withdrawn. Right. We've taken care of that.
Just wanted to confirm.
That issue. Okay. All right. Councilmember Kaplan, comments on items 8 and 9, please.
Just briefly, want to call out the Financial Empowerment Cities Grant Agreement, which continues funding for our Financial Empowerment Center that helps those handle getting rid of debt and financial and wealth building and one-on-one. Just think this is something great that the city participates in and wanting to make sure we get the information out there of how people can participate. And then, as always, thank you to the city and others for the Splash Education Program, which educates about 1,000 students in 4th and 5th grade about educational science, because often science is not really promoted, but this is something that I hear nothing but wonderful things about. So just want to echo the good things that are going on with this program.
And item 9? That was 8 and 9 together. You did it very quickly. Okay, thank you. So we do have a motion and a second on the consent calendar. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye, oppose, abstain. The consent calendar passes in record time. Okay. We now move to item 14, which is the first item of our discussion calendar before we get to, I think, the main event for the evening, and that is the mixed income housing ordinance. Maybe this is the main event too, I don't know.
Could
Go
be,
right
up
ahead.
to you.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, well, good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jamie Mosler. I'm an Associate Planner in the Community Development Department, and I'll be giving tonight's presentation on digital kiosks. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we're good. Thank you.
All right, so as an overview, first I'll touch on what a digital kiosk is, provide some background on how we got here, and then share the ordinance and resolution along with staff's recommendation. So what is a digital kiosk? As you'll see on the images on the slide, it resembles a large mobile phone, often on the sidewalk or public right-of-way, and it's an interactive platform that provides pedestrians with information and services through a variety of features. There is an item for this on the Law and Legislation Committee log, so staff worked with a consultant, Third Plateau, to conduct research in a two-phased approach. First, we did our best practices research, and then we conducted community outreach during phase 2. So before digital kiosks could move forward, city code does not currently allow for these. The first step for this would be needing to change the sign code to allow these. So what the ordinance does is defines digital kiosks. It adds them as a permitted sign type. It specifies their placement is exclusively on public property through an agreement with the city, and it also allows the city manager to set advertising standards. So if the code is amended, then the project would move into an implementation phase and a competitive procurement process where exact locations would be selected, features, and competitive process to select a vendor to provide a kiosk. And so what the resolution is intended to do is when the project gets to that implementation phase, is incorporate the findings of things we heard from community outreach along with direction from the Law and Legislation Committee to really streamline that process. So in the resolution, it includes features that are desired by the community and the committee, such as information about community events, public transportation, local businesses, navigation, emergency call functionality, air quality monitoring, and then through direction from the Law and Legislation Committee, it also includes cameras with security policy along with EV charging. Features that are not desired during the procurement process would be any technology that stores personal information. And then the resolution also provides other considerations saying that advertisements, while allowed, should be secondary to these other features for the community, should also be multilingual, accessible, reflect their unique neighborhoods. And once it gets to the point before a digital kiosk is installed, the resolution also directs further community outreach with a meeting that's noticed to surrounding neighbors so they better understand the kiosk that would be placed near them.
And who controls the content of the kiosk here under the concept?
That would be figured out through an agreement with a provider. Yeah. With that, staff is recommending City Council determine the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and adopt the ordinance and resolution.
And how do you deal with, turn it over to Vice Mayor in a minute, sorry, but how do you deal with the line between free speech, the First Amendment, and hateful or discriminatory content? You know, I mean, is this an open public access for people to come on in and say something that is hurtful or harmful to a group of Sacramentans or individuals?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, for the question. Kevin Collin, the zoning administrator in the Community Development Department. The way this would occur is the content of signs is typically there's a protected speech. However, these are located in public property. There would be an agreement by which they would be installed, and the content of those signs would, as Jamie mentioned, be subject to some standards that could be set by the city manager or designee in terms of appropriate content. That could be, as you mentioned, there could be content that would not be appropriately displayed.
But that is the question. What is appropriate and what is not? Again, there's controversial points of view, which are clearly protected, and we encourage, and we want free, robust expression. This is important. Yeah.
Good morning, Mayor. Angel Solis, Deputy City Attorney. They are not considered public forums, so Howard would have the authority to set the advertising standards differently than we would in a public forum, including prohibiting hate speech or any things like that.
Okay. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if there's no public comment, let's move that first.
Is there public comment?
Yes, Mayor, I have two speakers on this item, Isaac Gonzalez and Marbella Sala.
Isaac.
Good evening, Council Mayor. My name is Isaac Gonzalez, lifelong resident of City of Sacramento, resident of Tahoe Park, District 6. Also, an active transportation commissioner. Just a couple of thoughts and concerns about this is that if these kiosks are to be placed anywhere in the close to our high injury corridor networks and they are visible by motorists, just a bit of concern there that they are a distraction and they can cause further distractions, which could increase potentially collisions and injuries. So that's one piece of consideration. If these are, say, in Old Sacramento or near the arena site where they're not visible by motorists. I don't see any kind of issue with that. And the other thing I just want to bring up for consideration is that we currently have a billboard moratorium in the city, where if an operator wants to place a new billboard or a different face somewhere, they have to reduce square footage they have existing, or at least move that square footage, so there's a net zero gain. So if we're going to be adding new advertisements within the city, I'd just like the city to get a little more public benefit out of it, and just that it's not a total giveaway, but there's some kind of give and take with that. Otherwise, I'm not against the idea, but just want to be a little more thoughtful on those two concepts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Marbella Sala?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. And I'm speaking on this because about 2 years ago, this whole concept was brought to Garlandland Northgate Neighborhood Association. I think it was through the Hispanic Chamber. There was a consideration of a pilot. And our community was very excited about this prospect because it would give our community an opportunity to get information that otherwise they wouldn't get, such as health benefits, activities that were happening in our neighborhood, anything that the city wanted to communicate to our neighborhood, it would be communicated through the kiosk, and it was going to be a pilot. And the thinking in response to Isaac was that ideally, when we put in more bus stops, that would be a great place to put these kiosks. People are waiting and sitting and could be reading this information that would be helpful. We were also excited at the prospect that schools could highlight things about students on these kiosks. So there's a great benefit for our community to receive information that otherwise wouldn't be getting. So I really support this, and I'm glad that you're looking at this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marbella.
I have no more speakers.
All right, I do have a number of my colleagues up on the dais. Vice Mayor, were you first? I'm
Yes.
sorry, you were first, and Councilmember Maple.
Yeah,
and-
thank you very much. So this came about from our commercial corridor efforts. How do we create more economic activity? How do we highlight businesses on the boulevards, such as Stockton Boulevard, Del Paso? How do we look at thinking about the future, and particularly in areas where we have multi-language communities, where you can quickly transition to a different language? If you think about Stockton Boulevard, there the restaurants and the businesses and the owners and the community, Spanish, Mien, Vietnamese, Chinese, and a different, even both Mandarin and Cantonese is spoken there as well. And so the idea of the digital kiosk came about how do we look at tools that also have multi-purpose benefits as well. One of the key issues, the exciting issues that we've discussed this, and this has been in the works for 6 years now, is my understanding. We started before the pandemic, and obviously during the pandemic, there were some staffing changes, and it's unfortunate that it's taken this long to get to this point. But I do want to thank the diligence that the staff has done to look at what other cities have done. But looking at EV charging, we know that the cost of infrastructure to put in an EV charger in many places in public charging is expensive. This ordinance allows for the ability to way to finance these types of activities as well, and it's already occurring in other places in the city, and some of it is on private property, but not on the public right-of-way. So this allows us the opportunity to look at more opportunities of EV charging. One of the reasons the Air District showed up in support of this is because we can also tack on air monitors. And this allows us to do better air monitoring in different parts of our city as well, and particularly in areas where we have high traffic volume, or areas where we want to understand what the ozone or particulate matters are there as well. And one of the issues, again, limited in the comments during the Law and Legislation Committee, was also camera for the sake of security, for parking lots, particularly in the issues where we've had, say, for example, Delta Shores, when we had street racing inside the parking lot specifically. Again, not to collect personal data, but to help assist in the public safety of it. So digital kiosks not only enhance the ability for us to highlight businesses and boulevards, and particularly when we're encouraging a walkable community, that when you're on the boulevard, we want to get people off their cars and being able to wayfind. it also gives us an ability to, as these would require an agreement with the city manager, to be able to control the content so we can highlight particular information. And in the case of emergency, I want to thank the Chair of Law and Ledge for bringing this up. In the case of emergency, we can immediately connect with the technology to be able to give people directional wayfinding as well. And not just in English, because most of the time, we want to make sure that in particular communities, we want to make sure that the wayfinding is language flexible. And so for this, I want to say that when this item came up, it was, we're thinking about what's the future look like. Now, I know, Mr. Mayor, you asked some questions about content. This is no different than our sign ordinance that we have already in the sign district. So if it's good enough for Golden 1 and it's good enough for the downtown area, it should be good enough for our commercial corridors like Stockton Boulevard, Del Paso, and Franklin. And with that, I'll go ahead and move the item and thank the staff for 6 long years of work to get to where we are today.
Very good. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Maple, then Councilmember Laloy. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. And I really want to thank my colleagues who brought this forward long before I was on this body, and their staff that have been working on this for many years, because it's before my time, but it's something that I think is something that is needed. There's no reason why we shouldn't be looking at ways that we can utilize technology in our role in government here. And I think there's a lot of benefits to the community at large. So just a few that, off the top of my head is, as someone who also represents a lot of the business corridors in the city, including Stockton Boulevard and Franklin and Freeport and Florin and Mac and Broadway, I see a direct connection to our P-bids and to our business communities there, where people are looking for ways that they can navigate and figure out what resources are available, what small businesses are available, where can they go, how can they get there. And this could also help with not putting a strain on our own city staff. Think about people's ability to navigate things like 311, right? You see something, you see illegal dumping or other trash on the ground, being able to navigate these things without having to pick up the phone and call, that's all taking away from staff time. And I think it really gives more equity. One of the other things that I read about some kiosks that exist in other cities is that they are able to provide power and connectivity and Wi-Fi access. So this is about broadband equity too, which I know is something a lot of my colleagues also care about. When I represent a lot of low-income communities that don't always have easy access to Wi-Fi. This could be a piece of the pie there. And I just think overall, this is a way for us, it could also be a public safety mechanism for us as well, right? And we're able to collect that data and use that. And so I think I heard loud and clear from our small businesses that this is something that they support. And so I'm really glad to support this today, and I'll be seconding it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Councilmember Laloy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of to follow up with Vice Mayor and Councilmember Maple, I think this is great. I'm kind of shocked that it took 6 years. But again, I guess better late than never. It's a way of the future. So not only we get advertising in there, but again, we can have messages that our residents can see in real time. I would like to know at some point the revenue that this is going to create for City of Sacramento. And I'm totally in agreement that the business corridors, I noticed that Vice Mayor and Council Member pointed out everything on the south side, but Del Paso Boulevard and Marysville Boulevard are definitely going to be on that list. So I'm very excited. It took 6 years. The time is now. I would love to get some information on the economics benefits of these kiosks that's going to bring in. And just with the protocol that we have regarding our current signage, I'm assuming that there's not going to be any political advertising on these allowed, and it's just going to be about products and companies that are going to pay for their ads to run. So I'm definitely supportive of this move. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a few comments, and would like to add a direction to an additive direction to this item. So really happy that we're here. I think we're trying to modernize our city, and I think it's really awesome that we're moving in this direction to have digital kiosks. I think having the ability to control what we put on there or work with partners, that's going to be really key. And I too also represent 2 corridors, Florin and Mac Road, like Councilwoman Maple. And I do believe this is a really great way, one, to highlight our local businesses, provide information about what's happening in the city, And so I think this is a really great first step forward. But something that I also like to bring up as well, related to this, but not so related because I am going to support this item, is for us to have a larger conversation regarding just content on advertisement overall in the city of Sacramento. I know today we're just voting on the digital kiosk, and that content will be overseen by our city manager. But I do think that it's time as a city for us to kind of look at the larger conversation of content of advertisement. And I'm bringing this up in this moment because this is digital advertisement, is that I have noticed just an increase in cannabis, alcohol, and even tobacco ads targeting our youth in our city. And just like we no longer see much of tobacco advertising, even though it is still around in low-income neighborhoods, because in the late 90s, the federal government sued the tobacco industry, and so because they knew of the harm, the impacts that the tobacco industry had on young people, we are also seeing the implications of alcohol and cannabis on our youth in our city, and there has been targeted ads towards young people. And so I want to have a larger conversation. I think I'm going to support this item today, but with the direction that staff comes back. I know I've spoken to staff a year ago about, exploring what a city ordinance may look like, because I know other city has done this as well, but not just on cannabis, but also alcohol and tobacco. And we should have a general ordinance citywide about how we treat legal substance, especially when they have harm on our young people, especially when they make a large percentage of our residents in our city. And so happy to pass it today, but want to direct staff to see if we can work on updating or creating an ordinance and really looking at citywide advertisement. I know there's a lot of legality around freedom of speech, but I know there are other cities that have restricted their billboards in terms of what type of advertisement. Cannabis, alcohol, and tobacco, they're going to be okay without ads on our streets because we know that most of these ads harms our low-income young people. And so I want to put that on the record and hope that we can have staff to begin looking at that and bring something back.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I suggest we work with you to get this item heard before the Law and Legislation Committee and then to come back to this council?
That sounds great. I'm not on Law and Ledge, but happy to work on it and then hand it over to Law and Ledge to have a conversation.
Perfect.
Yeah, Councilmember Vang and I can submit a proposal.
I think it's a really important and appropriate discussion. I do. Councilmember Valenzuela.
Thank you. Also support the item coming. I think we've had this conversation with regard to cannabis on Law and Ledge quite often, is how do we tackle those issues, and even like I just submitted a hemp regulation item because there's nothing including hemp products, even though they can often have very high THC content, and so there's a lot of work to do. And we had a young person who thankfully wasn't actually 14, but just like walked into the store and bought this, but because she looked 14 and had no ID, no nothing. It was just incredible, and it was branded to her, which was amazing. But I want to thank staff for all the work on this. I had made some suggestions about privacy and surveillance of the technology, and I just appreciate seeing that included in here. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of reasons why people would want cameras on there, so people could interact with displays or do different things, but making sure that data, there was some policy in place to ensure that data didn't just go anywhere was really important. And regarding the EV charging, both for vehicles, but also for the scooters and the bikes, that was something that the Active Transportation Commission actually reached out to me about really early on was, is there a way to pay, like it would just be a simple outlet so that they could plug in phones or plug in bikes or plug in whatever, but how do we make that work and potentially increase those vehicles, which are being used increasingly in my district, which is something I'm really excited about. I've had the opportunity to travel to some cities that have these, like New York City, Detroit, others, and I noticed that sometimes they don't get used a ton, and like maintenance can be an issue, and I know the city manager is going to be astute to that when you're making these agreements, like what is your plan to maintain this, what is your plan to check in, but in general, really excited about the possibility, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, when it comes to emergency response in particular, like I have a whole pocket of Cantonese speaking only people in my district, and like it terrifies me to think about if there was a flood warning really quickly, like how would they know to get out? How would they know where to go? So the thought that we could have potentially these opportunities to say in their language, oh my gosh, something's coming, please make sure you're safe, is really exciting to me, in addition to all the other possibilities that are here. So I'm happy to support. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I appreciate, all the points of view here. And it's interesting to see where the conversation is today versus where it was 6 years ago, where it was, very scary or whatnot. But I think and I think the city's done a very good job of partnering with both not only the sign district, but the Golden One Center in content of material and advertisement. And so I think we've learned a lot in that area. I agree, again, as my colleague mentioned in the Law and Legislation Committee, we've talked a lot about, the aspects of advertising specifically when it relates to cannabis. So I think that it's prudent now to have that conversation as well about what can the city do, and whether it's advertisement that's in the public right of way where we may have more authority versus that where it's completely private and subject to the First Amendment and what can be done in that. I think it's important that we explore the legal abilities, the legal authority that we have there. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm excited because I do think that this can bring a little more life into areas. I mean, I know in the area where it's the city and county adjacent, there's interest in some of the business over there of trying to create a Little Saigon entertainment district, and so this kind of makes it a different place. It doesn't always have to be always just downtown, but in an area where you can bring a little more excitement. So with that, I appreciate everyone's comments, and I'm excited about working forward and in this new proposal.
Very good, thank you. It's been moved and seconded with, I think, the acceptable additional direction from Mayor Pro Tem Vang and a potential process. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, that passes unanimously. Good work, staff, good work, members. A lot of years in the making and very, very important. All right, members, we now move to item 15, and I want to make just a very brief opening comment as Ms. Seuss and your team, Mr. Hurdle and everyone else come on up here. So Lamed, I'll just take a minute here before I turn it over to you. Members and members of the public, tonight is the beginning of a very important discussion and debate and ultimate decision months from now regarding what I believe to be our greatest challenge: how to ensure that everyone, regardless of their economic status, has a quality, affordable place to call home. The challenges and the opportunities involve every part of the city, but are especially important in the central city, where we are dealing with a historic transition from downtown as just a place of work to a place to live, a place to eat, and a place to have entertainment and be entertained. I want to say this because this debate could get polarized, and I hope that it doesn't, and especially tonight in the workshop setting. We all share the same goals: enough housing supply for people of all means, continuing the housing, jobs, food, music, creative economy renaissance that was only temporarily, in my view, slowed by COVID, and making sure that even with good intentions, that we do not do anything inadvertently that harms that work and that progress. 3, acknowledging the difference, and there may be a difference, between the very important concept of inclusionary housing, which is intended in part not only to increase affordable housing supply, but also to achieve better economic integration. Distinguishing that important concept from the very real discussion and debate about how we pay for more mixed income housing. 4th, I urge us all, and this not the members as much as it is the stakeholders and the public, to not scurry into our respective ideological corners as we try to determine over time how the public sector and private sector can both participate to help fund more workforce and low-income housing, and to acknowledge that there may be a difference in approach depending upon the economic times that we're living in. The difference between challenging and difficult economic times and better times, what we hope will be better times ahead. Tonight is an opportunity without a vote to explore all the different options and have a really positive and constructive debate and discussion to provide that direction to the staff so that they can come back with something that there will never be perfect consensus, but at least comes as close as possible to trying to do something that is not only good but great for the city in the future. Thank you. Ms. Seuss?
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Good evening, council members. My name is Greta Seuss. I'm an associate planner in the Community Development Department, and I'm pleased to present to you today our preliminary recommendations for the mixed income housing ordinance. Tonight, we're seeking council feedback and input on these recommendations. The mixed income housing ordinance establishes requirements for how new residential development contributes to the production of affordable housing in our city. The mixed income housing ordinance was last updated in 2015, and direction to review the current ordinance comes from the city's adopted housing element. This past August, the city released the mixed income housing ordinance draft report. During this first project phase, we sought questions and feedback on the feasibility analysis, as well as input on draft policy objectives and potential ordinance options. Phase 2, where we are now, includes the release of preliminary recommendations for a revised ordinance. We're currently seeking input on these recommendations today, and we'll move on to final recommendations and final ordinance for adoption in the winter and spring of next year. Before reviewing recommendations on revisions to the ordinance, I'll briefly review the current ordinance structure. The current ordinance requires a per square foot impact fee to be paid by all new residential development. The current fee rate is $3.54, with a lower fee in the housing incentive zones shown in yellow on this map. The program exempts high-density projects from paying the fee, along with developments providing at least 10% affordable units. The program brings in an average of about $1 million per year in fees and has produced an average of 122 affordable units per year. When looking at other jurisdictional requirements, our report found that in our region, a 10% affordable requirement with an in lieu fee option is most common. Among larger city themes, we saw a menu of compliance options being offered, variation by market area or AMI, and incentives for on-site units. Among our case study jurisdictions, in lieu fee amounts ranged from $6,000 to $10,000 per market rate unit, $250,000 to $478,000 per affordable unit, or per square foot fees ranging from $19 to $45. For the feasibility study, because of recent varying market cycles, the analysis looked at results for 2 points in time: the current market and a prior more favorable market. The study found that under current conditions, on-site affordable units or substantially increased affordable housing fees are a challenge for both for sale and rental projects. Results under more favorable recent conditions could be considered. For sale projects are in a better position to sustain on-site requirements, especially projects on large sites that are able to set aside a site for a 100% affordable project. Rental projects are challenged to support an on-site affordability requirement in most submarkets, even with more favorable market conditions, but do support a removal of the $0 housing impact fee rate and a higher housing fee in some locations. In addition to the release of the draft report and feasibility analysis, we released draft policy objectives to guide our decision-making in this project. These objectives are: increase affordable housing production, ensure long-term affordability, affirmatively further fair housing, anti-displacement, mixed income communities, and do not pose a constraint to overall housing production. These policy objectives have guided the preliminary recommendations that we're reviewing today. In summary, the preliminary recommendations are to adopt a citywide on-site affordability requirement with an in lieu fee option. The in lieu fees vary by market area and are phased in tied to housing production. Incentives are recommended to be identified for on-site unit production, and larger projects are required to provide a higher on-site percent requirement. We're proposing that projects with 10 or more than 10 dwelling units provide affordable units on site with a menu of options to meet the requirement. The requirements vary between for sale and rentals due to the difference in area median incomes to afford each project type. If project applicants do not want to provide affordable units on site, per square foot in lieu fees may be paid. In lieu fees are proposed to range between the current housing impact fee rate of $3.54 and $10 per square foot and vary by market area of the city. Due to existing less feasible market conditions, we're proposing a phase-in of the proposed fees starting in January 1 of 2025 that is tied to market rate housing production. The initial fee rate as proposed is the current housing impact fee rate, but removes the exemption for high-density projects and removes the housing incentive zone. The in lieu fee would only move on to step 2 if housing market conditions improve. The number of market rate housing units produced in the preceding year is being used as an indicator of market conditions. If building permits are issued for 2,500 or more units, then the in lieu fee would move to step 2. If this number of units is not produced, the fee would stay at step 1. This graph shows citywide housing production from 2013 to 2022. The gray portion of each bar represents market rate units, excluding accessory dwelling units. The remaining green portion of each bar represents deed-restricted affordable units and accessory dwelling units. The red dotted line shows the proposed threshold amount of 2,500 market rate housing that would need to be produced in order to phase in steps 2 and 3 of the full in lieu fee rates. It's proposed that accessory dwelling units and deed-restricted affordable units are not considered in our threshold housing production trigger. This is because financing for ADUs and affordable housing projects are not typically subject to the same market forces that market rate housing is. Using the Central City as an example, this graph showcases the cost for a high-density housing project to comply with the existing and proposed ordinances on a per square foot basis. The first column shows what a project would pay under the existing ordinance, which exempts high-density projects from paying the $3.54 per square foot fee. The next 3 columns show the per square foot cost of compliance with the recommended on-site affordable unit provision options. Building the units on-site would meet many of our policy objectives, but it would add approximately $40 per square foot to the cost of the project, which is not economically feasible. Finally, the last 2 columns show the per square foot cost of compliance using the proposed in lieu fee payment option. The first orange bar shows the proposed initial fee rate of $3.54, and the second bar shows the final fee implementation of $10 per square foot. Again, this is only an example of what a compliance cost comparison would be for a project in the Central City, but it's meant to show the difference between the current requirement and the proposed recommendations. While we're proposing an on-site requirement, state law requires that alternatives to on-site affordable unit production be offered, such as in lieu fees. And as shown on the last slide, it will be more cost-effective for a developer to pay an in lieu fee. So in order to incentivize on-site unit production, we're recommending exploration of ways to incentivize on-site unit production, such as a reduction of impact fees or infrastructure improvement costs. Use of the state's density bonus will also be an option if units are income restricted for at least 55 years. Lastly, the preliminary recommendations propose a higher requirement for projects that include 750 or more units and a site size of 15 or more acres. This increased requirement is due to the ability of these projects to leverage state funds such as bonds or tax credits. For these large projects, the land dedication would be the only available alternative. Staff has conducted outreach on these recommendations over the past month and has received helpful input thus far. We've met with the city's Housing Policy Working Group, presented to the Planning and Design Commission, and held multiple focus groups to get feedback on these materials. 2 key concerns can be summarized based on the input that we've received to date. The first is related to our objectives to affirmatively further fair housing and create mixed income communities. The main concern here is that due to the level of the in lieu fees, the fee payment will be chosen and few affordable units will be constructed on site. The second concern is related to current market infeasibility and the impact that increased fees will have on new development. This is related to policy objective 6, which is to not constrain overall housing production. Staff will be incorporating feedback on these recommendations over the coming months. After receiving input on these recommendations tonight, we'll return with final recommendations in early 2024, followed by final ordinance adoption in spring of 2024. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions along with Matt Hurdle, Principal Planner, and our consultant David Dozema from Kaiser Marston, as well as SHRA staff.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very good presentation. We do have 16 people signed up to testify, and maybe a few more. So why don't we hear from the public first, and then we will turn this over to the council for either interactive discussion with staff and or various care holders and with each other.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have 18 speakers on this
18.
item. Looks like maybe one more.
19.
I do want to remind members of the public this meeting is being video streamed and can be viewed live or later on the city's website. We're no longer accepting speaker slips as this item has begun. Members of the public who wish to address the council will have 2 minutes each person. So that everyone has the opportunity to address the council, members of the public are asked to observe the rules of decorum. The council rules of procedure outline decorum expected in chambers and can be found on our website, and a copy is in the back of the room and is summarized on the back of the speaker slip. For instance, use of swear words, yelling from the audience, physically threatening conduct, and displays of disrespect are discouraged. The presiding officer will request that a person cease disruptive conduct. If not immediately stopped, the presiding officer will direct the person to leave the room. So I'll call up a few names. Jonathan Cook, Michael Alt, Matt McDonald, Robert Copeland, and your timer is displayed behind me.
Good evening, Jonathan Cook, Executive Director of the Sacramento Housing Alliance. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this really important proposal and really appreciate city staff for their engagement with stakeholders in the community. We're really in support of adopting a mixed income and inclusionary policy to further affordable housing and make sure that while we have a focus on development in Sacramento, that we're making sure that folks don't get left behind. And so we're really wanting to focus in particular on our lowest income residents and communities of color. I also wanted to share Sacramento Housing Alliance and the School of Social Work at Sac State conducted a survey of 1,500 households on the question of whether we should strengthen local government requirements for private developers to require affordable requirements for new development. And the results came back from the respondents that 78% agreed that local government should make that requirement. We're going to be sharing that at our Call to Action Affordable Housing Summit on Thursday, so we look forward to releasing those results more widely after that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Michael Alt and Mac McDonald.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Was going to say hello to Howard. Oh, there he is. Michael Alt, Executive Director of the Downtown Partnership, and we represent the 66 square blocks of the Central Business District. I do want to start by saying we do appreciate the outreach effort that was made to get input on this. Clearly, there is a lot of feedback. I've been in this job for over 25 years, and occasionally you come up with items that have a lot of feedback. This would be one of those items that has very strong opinions. While we share the city's goal to increase production for attainable housing, we're in opposition to staff's recommendations as the current proposal we feel renders development infeasible and would increase overall rents. Notably, this proposal fails to align with the city's goal number 6, do not pose a constraint to overall housing production. With a combination of high interest rates, material and operational costs, and the implementation of the city's development impact fees, we feel this proposal comes at a time when development conditions are already extremely fragile. Furthermore, targeting the city's central city with the highest in lieu fee contradicts the city's priorities of creating greater density in the urban environment. where construction starts have already decreased 94% in 2023 compared to 2021 and 2022. Of what minimal housing we believe might be built, increased costs associated with projects would be passed down to renters with an estimated monthly rental increase of $90 on non-deed restricted units. Similar policies have proven to have negative consequences in cities such as Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco, where policymakers are currently looking to urgently course correct and address the growing housing shortage. Alternatively, Sacramento has been a leader historically in affordable housing production compared to regional submarkets. This policy, if enacted, would cause a steep drop.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Our next speaker is Matt McDonald, Robert Copeland, John Krantz.
Good evening. I'm Matt McDonald from the California Apartment Association, which represents over 60,000 housing providers statewide and over 3,000 in Sacramento County. Number one, I want to thank staff as well. I think they've done an excellent job in outreach, the planning department, outreaching to the stakeholders on this issue. We've had multiple communications with them over the course of the last few months, so I thank them for that. We are deeply concerned, though, about the proposed changes to the existing mixed income housing ordinance considered that could effectively end new multifamily development in the city. In recent years, the city of Sacramento and its elected officials have repeatedly and passionately argued for increased housing supply. This is a mission we wholeheartedly support. However, the changes proposed in the ordinance are counterproductive to increased housing supply and lowering overall housing costs. Your own consultants confirmed this proposal is unworkable. In particular, a substantial increase of the affordable housing fee per square foot is a number with no regard to developer cost, market conditions, financing, and regional competitiveness. Development does not happen in a vacuum. Housing providers and builders must contend each day with tremendous cost burdens, such as currently very high interest rates, other city fees, some of which this council just recently increased, higher than ever cost of materials and construction, and the significantly lower, more competitive fee structures of nearby communities. Despite all of that, since 2021, the rental housing industry has added over 8,000 new units to the Sacramento market, with 2,500 of those coming in 2023 alone. As a result, rents have recently started to come down across the region. Don't kill the progress you have made. Work with our industry productively to streamline approvals and provide builders with manageable cost certainty. Focus your energy on breaking down development barriers instead of raising them. We as an industry hope you will move in this direction to improve supply and bring prices down. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Robert Copeland, John Krantz, Chris Norum.
I got a few questions. One, how much revenue would be generated by this new ordinance, and how many housing units? I didn't hear that in that presentation. Also, anybody that don't like this, come up with a better plan, because what we have now is not working for Sacramento. Because we got a lot of homeless population. Rent's going up faster for a lot of people than their income, especially if they're low-income people like on SSI or work minimum wage jobs. They deserve housing too. Come up with a better plan. Like the Downtown Partnership, do they have a plan? Does the California Apartment Association have a plan? I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. John Krantz, Chris Norum, Nick Advis, and then Dan Allison.
Hello. It clearly sounds like you put some thought into this idea. I think the idea of mixed income housing is definitely one of the most humane ways of dealing with things without creating poverty pockets. This is business of the in lieu in charges rather than putting together actual land. Makes me a little nervous. It seems like your breaking point there is kind of high. I really have to study this more, though, before I call that out on that. But I think that I'm in favor of this idea. I think it needs some more work before we're done with it. But I think we're on the right track. And I would like to see some more development in this area. As far as these high interest rates and things go for building, maybe there's some way we can figure out to help subsidize that and make it possible. Because it's clear, we just have too many people sleeping in tents on the side of the road. That's got to stop. And it's not good for business, not good for the people living in the tents, not good for what would be good for them is to get them inside and do it in a way that they're mixed in as part of the culture, not off in some island somewhere where they're segregated and don't have a way to climb out of the poverty hole that they're in. So, anyhow, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Chris Norum, Nick Avdis, then Dan Allison.
Good evening, Council. Chris Norum, North State BIA. I think as many of you know, we're opposed to this proposal, even though we greatly appreciate the staff's outreach to us and the work over the last couple of years. The current fee program that did replace the former inclusionary program has been successful at creating both a rapid amount of market rate production as well as affordable units. And when you actually look at the number of total affordable units that are created under the in-lieu fee program, it's actually more per year than the years under inclusionary. So our position is that the on-site build requirement will actually lower housing production, increase costs, and importantly, will actually stymie the ability for affordable builders to actually get state bonds and tax credits. So this is an important element we want to make sure we protect as they go forward. No other jurisdiction around us has these kinds of high levels of costs for affordable housing, and the city's own independent analysis made it clear that the on-site build requirement is infeasible. For all apartments, almost every type of market rate unit will not be feasible. So we know that this is not the council's intention. We want to continue to work together to build. So it's our feeling that when you're looking at this, you really should be just looking at tweaks to the current plan, the current in-lieu fee program, and we can't sustain a $10 per square foot level, but that's something, as we look at options, that's something that we're happy to have a continued discussion on looking forward as to how we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Nick Avdis, Dan Allison, Isaac Gonzalez.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Nick Avdis on behalf of Avdis and Cucci LLP. Speaking before you today, representing several market rate home builders, including Lennar Homes, Integral Communities, Taylor Builders, Meritage Homes, and Next Generation Capital, and many others. First and foremost, I think all of us agree that that we are in a housing crisis. There's no doubt about that. My clients and others in the home and building industry are playing a role in the system to deliver the housing units that we desperately need for all income levels to our citizens and beyond. After review of the materials in the agenda, I do have a few comments and observations, obviously, and appreciate the opportunity to participate in this ongoing discussion on this very critical issue. We have projects in various stages of development currently in various parts of the city, and all of my clients say the same thing, that any additional burdens, when you couple them with the recent suite of DOU fees and other burdens, and not to mention the current interest rate environment, would most certainly affect housing feasibility. And so, in fact, I have one client who has several infill projects right now that says if that DOU fee and the $10 a foot fee applied to their projects, they would not be feasible and would not get built. Obviously, that's not the intended consequence here. We're trying to address a very serious issue, which is broad-based and community-wide. I think the discussion needs to be broad-based and community-wide. I do applaud the mayor and others for their advancing community-wide solutions. I think there's a lot to talk about there. That certainly is not to say that the market rate community doesn't have a role to play, and we in fact are with providing the housing opportunities currently. So with that being said, I look forward to further discussion, including real-world implementation consequences.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Dan Allison, Isaac Gonzalez, then Aaron Teague.
Good evening, council members. Dan Allison, resident of District 4.
I'm sort of opposed to the suggested ordinance, but I think there's some interesting things about it. A lot of people have said that the existing ordinance is working. It's not. It is not providing housing at a wide range of income levels. It's not producing enough money to do that. And if that's its intent, it's failing in that sense. Housing for very low-income residents is what we are really lacking, and I believe that that's a lot of why we have so many homeless people on the street. The city, with the state, eliminated much of our very low-income housing on purpose to get rid of those people that they didn't like. And that happened during the 70s, but the city owes the residents correcting that problem. To some degree, affordable needs to be funded by everyone, all properties, not just new developments, and all citizens, not just a select group. There are two interesting ideas that came up in the comments. SHA commented that the city is great about responding to downturns, but doesn't do anything when there's an upturn. And also converting existing rental units to affordable is an idea worth exploring. The city has funded conversion of other types of things like motels and hotels, but I don't believe has funded any conversion of existing rental units to affordable. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Isaac Gonzalez, then Aaron Teague, then James Allison.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Isaac Gonzalez, lifelong resident, City of Sacramento. I was here, first before I begin, I want to thank Greta and all the staff for all their amazing outreach. Our Neighborhood Association Land Use Committee requested probably several times more clarification and actually a meeting, and you were more than courteous to make yourself fully available. We do appreciate that. I was here last week to talk about the missing middle and give our full support to that, and said, at the end of that, hopefully we can get to a place where we have affordable housing ordinance as well. I know there's still a lot of work to be done and that we're not going to be coming to a conclusion tonight, but I think that we're going to eventually find ourselves in a period of compromise. Compromise, by definition, is when all parties are a little bit upset. So I think if we get somewhere there where everybody has a little bit of give and take, we will find ourselves in a better solution than we are today, which is clearly untenable. Just look outside and you can see that the evidence is clear. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Aaron Teague, James Allison, and Danielle Foster.
Good evening, council and staff. Erin Teague on behalf of the Sacramento Association of Realtors. We want to thank staff for their time and outreach to our membership. They've done a great job on this, as I'm echoing from others. Today, we caution the adoption of the preliminary recommendations and request that the council consider eliminating the on-site requirement and shape an in lieu fee structure that works across the city. The city study shows that the on-site requirements are infeasible for all rental housing and for most for-sale housing. Realistically, the favorable market conditions that the study referenced are unlikely to return anytime soon. SAR has observed the city's significant efforts to prioritize policies that encourage housing production. This is evident from the numerous residential construction projects that are currently underway in the city. SAR's mission is to create and promote pathways to homeownership. However, we're concerned that the ordinance places an unfair financial burden on middle-income families. It requires the new housing projects to fund affordable housing, either on-site or through in lieu fees, which could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is more than other jurisdictions in the region. These costs are then passed on to the new homeowners in the project, which could cause home prices to increase up to 6%, making it harder than it is already for families to afford a home in Sacramento. Adopting the preliminary recommendations may inadvertently worsen the housing crisis by pushing development towards the outer fringes of the region or stop it altogether. Policies that deter growth have more significant economic impacts, such as a shortage of local job opportunities and diminished contributions to the actual housing trust fund. It's important to acknowledge that the additional costs of the policy aren't happening in isolation, as has been mentioned earlier. The city's been updating all of its housing policies, which has led to increased fees. As a result, it puts Sacramento at a competitive disadvantage compared to neighboring jurisdictions without such fees. Ultimately, SAR wants to make sure that Sacramento continues on its trajectory to build more housing. We appreciate your.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. James Allison, Daniel Foster.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is James Allison with the Midtown Association, representing over 1,200 properties in our central city. Our mission is to make Midtown the center for culture, creativity, and vibrancy in Sacramento's urban core. First, I would like to start by thanking staff for the extensive work that they have done to get us here today. We are extremely appreciative of the meetings and the dialogue that have gone on so far. Across the board and across all income levels, there is simply not an adequate supply to meet the growing need for housing units. Further, this extreme shortage is a primary driver in the rent affordability crisis that we currently face. The solution that can address both of these challenges is simply building more housing. It cannot come from further onerous regulation that comes in tandem with increased DOU fees, an increasing BOT, and just today, a proposed vacancy tax, especially while interest rates hover near 8% and the cost of inflation continues to skyrocket. The city is already seeing affordable housing production at a rate higher than that is sought by current goals. In fact, according to the city's 2022 Housing Element Progress Report, 56% of all units produced were low or very low income, a higher percentage than the 37% sought by the city. Under the current model, Sacramento is already far outpacing comparable cities in affordable housing production. How instead might this trend continue with no modifications to the existing ordinance? A prescriptive on-site requirement removes the ability for developers to include an affordable unit at a level that makes sense for each individual project. Currently, most new multifamily projects in Midtown include some form of affordability component, but they are able to do so at a level that retains project feasibility. This requirement would remove that flexibility. Finally, it is understood that in order to retain project feasibility, developers must offset increased costs and lost revenue opportunities. The current assumption for that is that the offset would come from increasing the rents for market rate units. Put simply, this proposal is by very definition a rent increase for middle income households. Instead, we should be looking.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Our next speaker is Danielle Foster, John Hodgson, and Devin Strecker.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and City staff. I'm Danielle Foster, Executive Director of CADA. I want to say thank you to the City staff also for their efforts on this ordinance discussion and the work that has got into getting us to this point in the process. I also want to say thank you to the development community for the thoughtful conversations that are currently occurring on this topic of mixed income housing. I appreciate the work that is being done to seek mutually agreeable solutions for our city. I want to state my continued desire to focus on generating these ideas for options together, building upon what works for the development of housing as well as addressing our local housing needs. I ask that Council support these conversations and consider the options that come from the collective creative thinking. As part of these conversations, I would recommend consideration of options that include low and moderate income units in areas where their rent or price are below market, as well as properties within close proximity that could be developed together as to fulfill market, workforce, and affordable housing needs. Continuing conversations of city incentives and steps that could also facilitate this mixed income development is also important. I'm hopeful that with continued work together, focused on a timely resolution, we can identify mutually acceptable solutions and next steps that further all types of housing in Sacramento. And I look forward to being part of those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. John Hodgson, Devin Strecker, John Vignocci.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is John Hodgson, a company called the Hodgson Company. I've been in the Sacramento area for probably 40 plus years. I've been a resident of Midtown for the last 15. I've been working for the last 24 or 25 years on multifamily, single family, and mixed use throughout the city and the region. I'm not going to repeat what I was going to say, or it's already been said. I would simply say that one, I oppose these proposed changes for a number of reasons, and probably most importantly because it won't work. You can't add costs to a project that doesn't work already. Interest rates, et cetera, but it just is not going to work. The development community, the builders are not going to build because they can't afford to build, because the rents are too high, because they can't make the thing pencil. Instead of getting more affordable housing, you'll get less. if you get less affordable housing or less, market rate, you'll get less housing trust funds, which will then allow you less ability to finance. On top of that, you will lose construction jobs and other liabilities. UC Berkeley is putting a plan out, or a study out that's going to pretty much verify that in the next couple of days. What I would suggest is something similar to what Danielle said. Let's step back a little and look at some of the alternatives. There is missing middle project ideas out there right now. Our ULI group is looking at that right. The architects in town are looking at that right now. There are projects that are being built for $250,000 a unit, affordable, by design, attainable, missing middle. We need.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Our next speaker is Devin Strecker, John Vignocci, then Jack Blattner.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. I'm Devin Strecker, Executive Director and resident of the River District in District 4. I'd like to applaud the City Council and the staff for attempting to address our ongoing affordable housing crisis. All types of houses are needed to meet the demands of our population, especially affordable housing. However, this proposal seeks to create affordable housing at the expense of other renters. Creating constraints on new housing projects will not alleviate this crisis, but will only make it worse. The flawed analysis developed by the city's consultant says it all. Current recommendations assume rent increases to market rate units as a mitigation tool for the additional costs of these requirements. In other words, more rent increases for the vast majority of renters. This is directly opposed to the city's own stated objective of relieving the high cost of rent. Please reject this misguided attempt and work collaboratively with the development community, who will actually be the ones to build or not build more housing in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. John Vignocci, Jack Blattner, then Jesus Cacho.
Good evening, Mayor Steinberg and members of the council. My name is John Vignocchi, and I'm the managing partner at Urban Capital, a local development firm focused on attainable housing. While I appreciate staff's analysis and thoughts about how we can create more affordable housing, I'm here in opposition to the mixed income housing ordinance because the foundation of this proposed policy increases the cost of housing for future residents and renters and homeowners if the new housing gets built at all. The higher the project costs, the higher the risk. MIHO creates a negative feedback loop that makes housing less affordable. Reducing new housing supply means higher housing prices, the exact opposite result of what the measure intends to achieve. Furthermore, the MIHO the mixed income housing ordinance taxes these future residents to finance capitally inefficient affordable housing units that cost $650,000 per unit, more than the average cost of a new single family home. It's not sustainable. This $650,000 unit results from a broken federal and state funding model, something that the mixed income housing ordinance does not fix. It takes money out of the pockets of new renters and homeowners to fund this broken, inefficient system, and it's really backwards. Inclusionary housing is an antiquated policy stick that should be replaced with a broader revenue measure that uses carrots and incentives to finance capitally efficient affordable housing. Our firm is voluntarily building mixed income housing communities for low and moderate income earners without any upfront subsidy. With the right policies and subsidies, like a broad-based housing bond, for-profit and nonprofit developers could get to deeper levels of affordability without risking Sacramento's broader housing market for far less than $650,000 per unit. With the right incentives, the market will produce affordable housing voluntarily. Our firm is living proof that this is possible. We should not implement policies that limit the production of housing and increase the cost of new housing units at the expense of better policies that will actually deliver more affordable housing units. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I have 6 more speakers: Jack Blattner, Jesus Cacho, Herman Barahona.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Jack Blattner with the Sacramento Metro Chamber, representing member businesses throughout the 6-county region. We too have grave concerns with some of the prescriptions of this draft ordinance. We understand that Sacramento is falling far short of its affordable housing targets, and in fact, all of its housing targets under the RHNA. Housing supply is falling further and further behind housing demand, And as a consequence, median one-bedroom rent in the city of Sacramento has increased 75% in inflation-adjusted dollars over the past 10 years. As recently as 2013, an average one-bedroom in the city was $855 a month. In other words, market rate used to be affordable. But as you've heard unanimously from Sacramento housing developers, today's proposal would certainly raise costs on housing construction in the city of Sacramento and probably, barring a very unlikely return to favorable market conditions, make all housing construction in the city infeasible for developers for the foreseeable future. This would be a far bigger disaster for affordable housing in the city than the status quo is. A higher percentage of developed housing units being affordable is worse than useless if there aren't enough total units being produced. In fact, if we cared only about percentage of units being affordable, we'd be doing fine by some measures. According to the city's most recent Housing Element Progress Report, in 2022, construction of below-market units increased, while construction of moderate or above units decreased. Consider, in contrast, that last year in the city of West Sacramento, only 8% of housing units were affordable, and in Roseville, 3%. We would question whether we are doing a better job than those cities at securing housing affordability. Housing is too expensive because we are not supplying enough housing units to keep up with demand. We would encourage the council.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Our next speaker is Jesus Cacho, Herman Barahona, Ryan Masano.
All right. Good evening to all the members. Thank you very much. My name is Jesus Figueroa Casio. I am here because I have a few comments. So I'm going to talk about how important it is to build low-income housing. I am a nursing home worker, and then also I'm a steward in my facility. For some of us who are working, we cannot afford how the rent is going now. When I moved into my apartment complex, I was paying less than $1,000. Right now, it's $2,200. My income doesn't go that way. So we have so many homeless people, population in Sacramento. This is embarrassing. State of Sacramento, look at all these homeless people. I'm gonna be homeless because I'm no longer can afford my rent. And I'm working, I got 3 jobs. And I can't afford to pay my rent when I have to help my son in college. So please, members, we do need affordable housing for people who are lower nursing, housekeeping, laundry, even the people who are cleaning this building. I don't think they can afford the rent, the rate it is in Sacramento. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Herman Barahona, Ryan Masano, Keon Bliss, then Tamika Lecluse.
Good evening, members of the City Council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Herman Barahona. I'm with the Sacramento Environmental Justice Coalition. This ordinance has created quite a debate in our faith leaders groups and our community and public health groups. We have people on both sides of the aisle, but we are opposing this ordinance, not because we don't like it, because we think it could do better. We don't see enough inventory for very low-income households. We don't see a high enough in lieu fee to incentivize people to actually build. We would like to see that higher. And to be honest with you, I'm asking all of the people involved in this case that we need some leadership that can change the culture of how this is all financed. If we're all dancing to the beat of very quarterly earnings at Wall Street, of course we're never going to be able to build housing, but we have the space. We just look out there and you can build housing. The government can get back into building housing. We can do a lot more creative things to be able to house and have people live with dignity. How am I supposed to answer the question of Mr. Jose, who's a friend of ours at Sac EJC, who worked in construction his entire life? He now has a pacemaker. He can't afford to work anymore, and he has to pay $2,000 in rent right now. I'm trying to figure out how to get him housed. Because of a disability, he's no longer able to be part of the workforce. What this culture so far, since 2013 till today, tells me is that we have agreed to discard the poor and the marginalized. And that's not acceptable. That's not part of our ethos in this country.
We need to make sure that we make space for everybody and that all of us carry the burden of protecting our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ryan Misano, then Keon Bliss.
Good evening. Good evening. Probably everyone in the room and in Sacramento agrees that we have a housing problem and it needs to be fixed. There are generally two groups on housing issues: those that think the government needs to do more and those who think the government is the problem. I'm in the latter group. To fix this problem, it's necessary to look at history. It isn't the government's job to do housing. It is the job of anyone and everyone to help the poor, sick, homeless, and hungry, except government. All of these welfare problems make the poverty and homelessness problems grow worse, while increasing the debt slavery of the middle class. Since welfare began, Section 8 food stamps and WIC, all of which started after the income tax, which has legalized theft, our poverty and homeless problems have grown far worse. Whatever you subsidize will grow. Wherever you see low-income housing, you typically see major crime issues. Yes, we have the poor. I grew up poor too. But the solution to poverty is not government intervention. It's to let the private sector take care of it and to remove the banks and their almost infinite control over all big cities. The banks and the government have created this problem, and going to the government for help is letting the fox guard the hen house. We've been letting illegal immigrants into California, which the mayor defends, though his beloved Israel doesn't allow immigration of the people in Gaza into Israel, even though in 1948, 93% of the land in Israel belonged to Palestinians. So when we keep bringing people into California and stop building new housing, housing becomes unaffordable. Climate change is a hoax and overpopulation is nonsense. These are two arguments used to defend building new housing by private developers, as all 8 billion people on Earth can fit into Texas and Louisiana living at the density of New York City. I agree with earlier speakers. Building this housing will raise housing prices even higher than they already are. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Keon Bliss, then Tamika Lecluse.
As recently as August 2023, the median rent for all bedrooms and all property types in Sacramento City it was at $2,100. Median rent being about $2,100 too, with the average about $1,854 for an average apartment size about 827 square feet. The median household income in Sacramento City as of the 2020 census was $71,000, meaning that the median households are going to have to pay, if we're going by the median rent, at least 35% of their income, when it's generally recommended that people are paying significantly less. And then we wonder why there are tens of thousands of people that are living unsheltered on our streets every given night. I want to point out, too, that there are hundreds of people who die every single year while we dither about wondering where they're going to go, how we're going to provide affordable housing. And I can't help but notice how at no point in our conversations around the economy, whether it's good economy or whether it's bad economy, that business and developer communities consistently say it is a fragile time to build affordable housing, to put money into this. When is exactly an affordable time? Are they really that fragile? Some of them are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and they also have an outsized advantage in getting your seat. Sacramento City, from what I understand, is legally required to have city council members sitting on the boards of PBIDs. And at least 3 of you have receive your top funding from the California Apartment Association, California Realtors Associations, among other developers. So I don't think it's a matter of not.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Our final speaker on this item is Tamika Lecluse. Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Please take your seat. Your time is complete. Tamika Lecluse is our final speaker.
In violation of rules and policy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff. My name is Tamika Lecluse. I'm the Executive Director of the Sacramento Community Land Trust, and I'm a D2 resident. We urge you all to support the adoption of the Mixed Income and Inclusionary Ordinance. And I want to thank Greta and Matt for engaging with us and our allies and our partners, as well as the diverse interests in the business and the development community. I really appreciate the time you took. And I'm sure it was challenging to balance the array of concerns brought not just by us, but probably everyone a little bit. So it's great to get to this point today. We support an ordinance that requires the inclusion of affordable housing for rent or to buy. That really focuses on the lower income earners, the 80% and lower AMI. We support the city in fulfilling its charge and commitment to furthering its affordable housing goals. Under the fee-based structure, you and your predecessors approved. You and some of your predecessors approved. It actually resulted in fewer affordable homes and fewer homes altogether. You guys have a goal in your general plan, in your housing element. The way it's going now, you're not going to reach that. But with the recommendations from your staff that came really from the community of vested interests, you have an opportunity to meet those goals. You adopted and improved a housing element, that, like I said, is more likely to be realized with an inclusionary requirement. And if there is a fee-based policy adopted in the near future, it should balance out to support a number of units that would have been.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Mayor, I have no more speakers on this agenda item.
All right, thank you very much. I want to emphasize again to the public that this is a workshop in the beginning of a discussion. There's going to be more opportunities for us to wrestle with all the complexities and all the points of view that we have heard tonight over the next number of months. Let me now turn it to the City Council. I'll start with Councilmember Valenzuela.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everybody who came to speak tonight, in particular, those of you who've been here since 11 a.m. I see you. I want to start my comments by appreciating that we obviously have an overall supply issue, and I am committed, and I know many of my colleagues are, to figuring out how to meet that need. But it will take us years, if not decades, to build enough housing to address our affordability crisis. And the market, frankly, is never going to take care of the people on fixed income who are our growing subpopulations of people on the street. We need real solutions sooner than that. I also want to take a brief vignette to appreciate the comment that market rate housing in the city used to be affordable and ask, what happened to those units? Their prices skyrocketed. And it didn't skyrocket because there were construction improvements made. Some of those units haven't been improved since they were built. It skyrocketed because we have inadequate tenant protections in the city. And I'm really looking forward to that conversation happening next year. But I digress. Our regional housing needs assessment tells us that we need over 16,000 affordable units by 2029. This is affordable units for people who are currently and soon to be living in this community. And we have an obligation to solve for that number to our best ability, not through wishes and hopes, but through concrete policies with predictable outcomes that will move us toward that target. And I'm not saying this policy will solve this issue by any means, but I have been asking those in the for-profit community for other ideas since I took office. I have been saying that I have an idea about inclusionary, but it might not be the right idea. I have said again and again and again, if you have another idea, bring it to me. So to hear today that those conversations are starting now, after years of outreach, after months of staff doing outreach, after this being in our housing element, after multiple conversations, at worst feels like a delay tactic, and at best feels disingenuous. If there were solutions and alternatives to this crisis, I hope that you would have brought this forward. And if you continue to make claims that this will hurt middle-income people, I would like to see your pro formas that will make that case. I have been asking for that for months. And John, you know how to get a hold of me, and I asked you for that for months. So if you would love to email it to me, my inbox is open. I will say that to hear that there isn't a solution while failing to identify a concrete and specific new solution is frustrating. So I will say that I will argue that we cannot contend that we are following the rules when it comes to affirmatively furthering fair housing and our housing element more generally if we do not act on this issue in some way. So I support an on-site affordability requirement and really appreciate how it scales depending on the level of affordability. Deeper affordability, less a requirement. Less affordability, more of a requirement. I think that's really practical, and I appreciate staff for creating flexibility and how those requirements might be met. I do worry that these percentages are too low. And I will echo what Mr. Gonzalez said in his comments, though, that sometimes compromise is the best path forward. I think that if this is where we need to start, it's better than nothing, and do want to appreciate the efforts of our consultant and our staff to really figure out what the right number here might be as a starting point. I would love to see it higher, but I'm choosing to accept a compromise here and say that this is a good place to start. I do worry about the in lieu fee changes simply because I'm worried that the overall dollar amount per square foot just isn't sufficient. When we got rid of inclusionary housing in 2016, the Nexus study back then justified up to $15 a square foot, I believe. And so I'd really like to see, when staff brings this back, that analysis in today's dollars of what is potentially justified, because the reality is we are not collecting adequate fee revenue to cover the actual cost of building these units. We are not. And so if we are going to accept fees in lieu of building units, and that fee needs to be sufficient to actually cover the cost of building that unit. Otherwise, what are we doing? And I do think about the incentives for on-site units should be in excess of the requirement. We already have programs that incentivize affordable units in for-profit development. I don't want to see that replace the mandate here, because I think the goal of this policy is to raise the threshold here of what we expect, and to have those incentives, at least some of those incentives, like our fee waiver, maybe be reserved for those who are going beyond the requirement that is already in the law under this ordinance. So I will say that I'm ready to move forward with this ordinance language. And to my colleagues that are hesitant about this, I really urge you, what would you do differently, knowing that the Regional Housing Needs Assessment says we need 16,000 low-income units? That is our obligation under the law, to do all we can to try to meet that projected need. And our streets and our shelters are full of people with income that the market will never meet their needs. People on Social Security or disability, low-wage workers, veterans, just to name a few. The status quo is simply not an option. So I would like to see a draft ordinance come back to this body to deliberate. And I will note that it's not going to come back tomorrow. It's going to come back in a few weeks. And so this is the final timeline. If you really do have alternative ideas, this is your moment. We have a few weeks here where you can sit down and talk all you want and come up with those ideas. And if you come back to this council and say, here's our model for how we solve for X, here's how we think we could get to 16,000, I'm sure we'd all be all ears. I know I would be all ears. If there's a different way to do this, please tell us your ideas. But if not, I don't know what other alternatives exist. Again, this won't solve the whole problem, but it is a meaningful step forward to affirmatively furthering fair housing. So with that, I'm in general support of the staff's recommendation on this, and want to again applaud you all for tackling, as many commenters did, a really tough issue in our housing element, which was identified because we knew we needed to do more. And this is the idea that we've come up with. So if folks have better ones, I hope they'll share them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rick Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to recognize staff for the work that they put into this. Thank you for the briefing that we had, and I know you put a lot of work into this, and all the speakers who came out tonight and spoke to us to let us know what they feel as it relates to whether or not the plan that's in front of us is good or not. And Mayor, my understanding is that this is more like a workshop, so this will come back to us. We'll get another bite at the apple to be able to speak on this. So I want to give you my initial comments that, you know, I think we all can see, based on the number of speakers that have spoken, that this policy issue is complex. It requires that we balance the need to produce affordable housing without restricting or limiting market rate housing production. In addition, as some of the speakers have said, we need to make sure that any program that we have does not make us less competitive for affordable housing finance programs like bonds and tax credits. I believe that our current fee program does this, and I'd like us to explore what we can do under this program moving forward. I'd like to see us expand the in lieu program to the entire city at the current levels. That we use those proceeds to fund the zero impact fee program for affordable housing. That we have not an inclusionary on-site requirement. And I believe that this focus will keep us competitive for bond and tax financing and give us the best chance to build affordable housing with the least amount of impact on market rate housing production. So I just want to look at that. I want to look at that, Mayor, and see, does that work? I know it's totally against the proposal that's in front of us.
Repeat it again, please.
The current rate of the fee program across the entire city at the current level, 354. I think it's at 354.
So that would include then, your proposal would be to include the central city, because currently, even though the 354 applies, it's functionally zero, as I understand it, because of a number of different offsets against the 354, correct, Ms. Seuss?
Yes, the $3.54 is citywide already, except for the housing incentive zones where it's about half that, and projects that are high density pay a zero rate, so they don't pay that $3.54. But
So just knowing that, Councilmember James, maybe you can just explain what you're suggesting that
we would expand that to the entire city, the current rate of $3.54. So it would change from where we are right now. It kind of balances things out.
and not move it up to $10 as proposed by the staff.
Exactly.
Okay, this is the purpose of the workshop. Put it out there. Excuse me, no, again, explain again. There's a difference between what the formal fee is in high-density portions of the city, including the central city, and what the functional fee actually is. Can you please explain again?
the fee is $3.54 citywide, except for the housing incentive zone and for high-density projects.
Which are where generally?
Anywhere. Any high-density project anywhere citywide would not pay the fee, except for in the housing incentive zone, there's a lower rate. So I believe Councilmember Jennings is suggesting that we would just remove the housing incentive zone and the high-density exemption.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Okay, so let's...
So move that program to the entire city at its current level of $3.54 and pencil that out to see how that works as far as us being able to raise money that would fund the zero impact fee program for affordable housing.
But it's definitely, I think, staff should analyze this. Should analyze what both what the revenue would be, also to work with all the care holders again as to what they believe, what they perceive the impact would be of essentially tacitly raising the fee in high density areas from $0 to $3.54 a square foot. That needs to be discussed. Okay?
Thank you.
Analyzed and discussed. Okay, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was trying to organize the frame of thoughts here. But I think first what I'll do is I'll go by quoting our former housing staffer here, housing director, that, I'm glad that I think Kate is very fortunate to have her as an executive director. It's very unfortunate for us that, she moved on to greener pastures. But I do want to thank Danielle Foster for her comments. And I think, the points here, generating options together and looking at collective creative thought in this. Because I think what's important here, Mr. Mayor, and I think you put this in this context, is that being dogmatic and using dogma policy, I think could set us down the wrong path. And it basically then becomes a number games. It basically becomes who can get as many votes for what. And I think that is, I think that would fail us in this case. And I'll say it from my experience, both serving as a planning commissioner at the county-wide level, chair for the County Planning Commission, and then coming here on the council and watching the evolution of what was a very rigid, old, dogmatic policy to recognizing that we could not and were having difficulty producing housing right after the downturn of the housing market. And then looking at, I was always perplexed at the old inclusionary housing model, which essentially, as Councilmember Maple mentioned, the fee was added on to, and the requirement, which we saw from the consultants here, creates an added challenge and an added cost for on-site production in essentially Northgate and Gardenland, in Franklin, in Oak Park and on Stockton Boulevard. Probably one of the areas that have the highest amount of risk and challenges because they were built at different times without the adequate infrastructure. And it's no surprise that for a long time, they stayed vacant. So I've seen the progress here. And first off, let's acknowledge a couple things. One, is the cost of housing too high? Yes, the imbalance is there between income and housing. And is the number of production, is where we are in our number meeting our goal? We're not there. But I also don't want the council to forget the amazing progress we have done. In the face of the challenges that we have, I want us to go back, I think it was about 7 months when we had a presentation about how much affordable housing we produced in comparison to our peers and the per capita amount of production of affordable housing, mixed income housing, middle income housing, and market rate housing. And we have surpassed many of our peers in that. That credit, I think, goes a lot to our staff who have come up with different tools, different avenues, and different ways of trying to achieve faster and more production of housing in different income levels. And if you look back, and I wish we had the graph that you've used at the Law and Ledge Committee, where it shows the percentage of market rate versus affordable, and then where we are on the mixed income. And what you see is that earlier we were doing one thing, producing an extremely large amount of suburban market rate housing, and then extremely low income housing. And what you get is parts of District 1, parts of District 2, where we were actually going contrary to our SB 375 goals. You know, we were inducing sprawl in those areas, and we weren't actually getting the production in the commercial corridors. When we took the risk and looked at changing at an in lieu option and said, what's the outcome? What's the goal we want to achieve? All of a sudden, we saw a variety of different products arrive. And that meant all of a sudden now we weren't only building 4-bedroom, 2.5, 3-car garages. We were building different options at different income levels, not enough at the pace we needed to. And yes, after the loss of redevelopment, where we lost the gap financing for affordable housing, we still had even now a larger gap in the gap financing. And I think that is the conflict we're facing now. We're trying to jam an old dogmatic policy at a time when we used to have something that backfilled that gap financing. And now we have new, drastically changing realities. I was looking at the interest rates and how much they've changed over the last 10 years. And in the last 5 years, the cost of construction, the interest rates, the market conditions changed so much, but yet policy can be static. And I think that's where I worry about being too static in our policies and making sure that as we move forward, and I would encourage my members of the council here to use this workshop to think through and say, we should provide as many options to make a project pencil, because if it doesn't pencil, it doesn't get built. And what would happen, and you can see it when you drive up Highway 50, is you start seeing the sprawl up in the suburban areas, because at the end of the day, developers and builders are going to build where they can afford to build. Some of them who live in the city would want to build in the city, but the reality is they've got a business to run, and they're going to build where they can meet their pro forma requirements. So for us, it's important that we make sure that we truly understand those challenges. Now, when I was going through the consultant's report, a couple things were very contradictory. One, it talked a little bit about how that for this to work, you would have to maintain high, for it to be able to work, we'd have to maintain high rent rates, and which is contrary to what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to control as much as we can the cost of housing by the inducement of supply. The fees that we collect and options are intended for us to be able to build the workforce housing and also the extremely low income and low income housing. So I want to make sure that we don't all of a sudden have a perverse reaction here. I think the staff made it very clear that right now, in the current market condition, on-site construction is extremely challenging. Now, some of the folks who've built in District 6 have said, you know what, because of the cost of the land in this area, it's actually easier for me to build on-site than use the fee. Well, so they've done that. So I think it's important to allow that option, because at the end of the day, it's what can get built, because we need housing at all levels, not just at the suburban market rate, but we need that opportunity to go into, the 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home. When my wife and I moved to Tahoe Park, we moved into an old, 1948 2-bedroom house near the park. Beautiful little house, built at the time after World War II. But very few of those options are available. So all of these decisions can create that perverse option. So I would say, Mr. Mayor, I'm intrigued by Councilmember Jennings' concept here. And again, I'm going to be non-dogmatic by saying, rather than looking at increasing the fee, spreading it across, more of the city. And as I think one of the constituents mentioned from District 4, that they feel that it's important that everybody bear the burden. So I think those are important factors to look at. The last one, I'll also come back to what Ms. Foster mentioned. It's those moderate units, too, that we're missing. Those for teachers, for our clerical workers, for our working class. If we only set a policy that captures the revenue for us to fill gap financing for extremely low income, then what may happen is you'll get development that'll have to be much higher. So we'll be building for luxury or high-end construction and filling our gap financing, which we need the extremely low income. So that, I think, is something that when we look at the progress we have made, we've actually diversified the amount of types of housing, the types of products. I will also say that I think, we should take and I should have probably brought this up, it's probably in our policy platform during our Law and Ledge meeting, but, the legislature passed SB 326 and AB 531. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you were involved in some of those conversations with Senator Eggman and Assemblymember Irwin. But there's $6.3 billion in bond money that'll help for the extremely low income for on the medical treatment of beds, which those are some of the folks who are on our street that need that level of support in housing, that permanent supportive housing, that is a higher cost of housing. So that is, I think, a different piece that if all we did was collect fee revenue to try to capture the permanent supportive housing, we would burn up a lot of the money and have none for moderate income. So I think the balanced approach is the key thing. So I will say that a couple things that really stand out is that, the data from our staff has shown that forcing an on-site requirement may not actually help us in producing the diversity and the amount that we have. And if they build somewhere else, say they build across the street on the county side, then 0 of 0 production is still 0. We won't collect any revenue. So those are, I think, the things that I would hope that we consider. But I'm intrigued by Councilmember Jennings' approach here. And I do like the fact that if we backfill the fee exemption program, which costs us. There's no free lunch here. Like, if we're giving up a fee, that's coming out of the general fund. So I think if we can backfill that fee revenue, that's helped the fee exemption program. That's helped us produce, for example, we wouldn't have the Mercy Housing Project on Stockton Boulevard without the fee exemption program. With that, we were able to get that moving because of that and a number of other projects throughout the city. So I'll stop there, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's a good conversation to have. But I do think, the current staff proposal, not to be dogmatic, but there are, I think, a lot of concerns with that.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Laloe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First and foremost,
I'm sorry, Mr. Hurdle, did you have a comment before?
Yeah, I think there would be 2 points to help clarify and help with discussion, help aid discussion. One is I think it's important to understand how the revenue can be used. Under our current housing impact fee structure, it was developed through a nexus study demonstrating the need for housing for low-income workers, workforce housing. And so the funds that are generated through our current housing impact fee have to be used and they're administered by SHRA, have to be used for workforce housing. So there's parameters about how it can be used. It can't be used for senior affordable housing. It can't be used for our lowest income residents and permanent supportive housing, those coming out of homelessness. So moving to an in lieu fee structure doesn't have that same restrictions, would free up our ability to use the funds for council priorities, including permanent supportive housing and senior housing and the other things. So I think that lends itself to the discussion about how these funds should be used in the priorities for affordable housing. And also, I'd like to, if you don't mind, quickly invite our consultant, David from KMA, to clarify a point in terms of what impact a new fee structure, in lieu fee, may have on market rate rents. Is that okay?
Well, sure. But I want to make sure we're focused on what fee we're talking about. Is it the $3.54 fee that Councilmember Jennings suggested across the board? Is it the $10 fee over time? What is the?
Well, if we maintained the current structure, it's called a housing impact fee. That would have to be used for workforce housing. If we change to a structure, as we suggested, that's more of an in lieu fee on an on-site requirement, you don't have those same restrictions and can be used for other affordable housing like permanent supportive housing and senior housing.
Understood.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Briefly, please.
Thank you. David Dozema with Kaiser Marston Associates. So just quick point of clarification in terms of the different ways that a fee can be absorbed in a pro forma. One of the ways is that if rents increase, that can help absorb it. Another way is if the developer can negotiate a concession on land costs, that can help absorb it. Or if construction costs change over time or financing costs decrease. So there's a lot of different ingredients there, all of which can be bad or helpful or not helpful to absorbing something like a fee. In terms of what impact just a $3.54 fee would have if we assume that all that impact were absorbed by rents, it's roughly between 0% and 0.6% if we assume rents offset all that cost relative to the current. Yeah.
Well, does it raise the rent?
If that's one possibility, that if market rents were to increase, it could help offset the cost of that $3.54.
I understand, but the impact on the renter is what's important. So what is the impact on the renter of a $3.54 per square foot increase in areas that are paying a zero net fee because of the density incentives? What does $3.54 per square foot mean to the renter who currently is in a development or potential development that's not paying it?
So let's just say that the rent just for a new building is something like $2,700 a month, which is like a newer building might rent for something like that. If you assume that developer is able to pass, and this is a question whether this is the case, able to pass on that cost to the renter, roughly $10 per month in rough numbers.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Laloe, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, staff, for the wonderful report. When we met and, you had the great presentation, afterwards, I did have some questions and kind of went in and looked up some different jurisdictions. And I was kind of trying to figure out more regulation means what. And when I'm looking at cities like Portland, San Francisco, to a certain degree Los Angeles, what we're seeing is more regulation has not really ended up with more units. Even in our wonderful state of California right now, we're seeing that more regulation has resulted in higher prices, companies leaving, residents leaving the state. And the prices, especially for the middle class, has become somewhat unbearable. So when we come to the housing, I think Councilmember Valenzuela, you brought up a great point that the market rate at one point in downtown was an affordable rate. I think $800 is that someone said. And that has changed. So could it be because of inventory? I mean, after all, when we look at this surge of people that moved into Sacramento from the Bay Area cities, such as San Francisco, was Sacramento ready for that kind of an influx in population? Obviously not. And not having enough units kind of adds that to higher rents. It's just lack of inventory. Could we potentially fix that by fast-tracking plans and what have you so the developers can break ground faster and so we can increase our inventory and have these rents organically drop? I remember, maybe 10 years ago when you drove around Sacramento, a lot of these apartment complexes had these big banners in front of them with a moving special rate and free first month, don't pay a deposit, simply because we had more units than we had people that needed them. So that's one thing I like, to discuss more. And I know this is just a workshop, but that's something that I want to definitely look at. Ultimately, more regulation means higher rents for the middle class. So with the cost of living right now going up, as we can see, whether it's the price of gas, rent, groceries, all these add up. So as you indicated, it could be a $10 increase on the rent factor, which I think it's a little bit more based on your own numbers, but we could talk about that later. But that's just the one aspect of the rents that, the cost of living that's going up. So that's another thing that I wanted to just add to. I thought I heard one of the speakers indicate that right now in city of Sacramento, in order to build a low-income housing, it costs anywhere between $650,000 to $700,000 per unit. And that's a very, a pretty nice price tag. Yet, I think one of the speakers indicated that there are ways that it can be down to almost $250,000. So I would love to kind of maybe add that addition of a conversation to this particular agenda item, because I'm really curious, how is there a $400,000 difference per unit? And if truly we can build low-income housing based on $250,000 per unit, then we really need to look at it and see how is it possible so we can actually study that. And then going back to the impact fee, Councilmember Jennings, you brought up something interesting, and that's same rate the entire city. I like to kind of sit down and look at the data a little bit more on that to see how it affects it. Because as much as I love the idea, but I'm a little bit concerned when you get into certain communities, like let's say my district, that the income is fairly stagnant right now. And if we add fees to those projects, how would that affect the rent factor in those communities versus what it is now? Again, I don't have the information, but I think I would love to get some report on that from the staff to see how would that affect our operations. And that's about it. I just think right now, to add more regulations to a system that is kind of wobbly right now with the higher interest rates, costs of products going higher, I don't know, is it better for us to attract more people to build to get out of this mess that we're in? Or is it wiser for us to create more regulation to attract less people to build, but have a goal at the end and how fast we can achieve it? That's, the questions that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kaplan, then I'm going to make a couple comments. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Greta and Matt, you have had an extremely long day, and so I just want to call, you guys have been in front of us probably 2/3 of the day on two extremely big items. I don't think we thank our staff like we do here, but it's a lot. We're elected to be here. You have been with us all day, and this has been a culmination of a lot of work over many years. So I want to thank you because I've never once heard a complaint about you two. They can complain about us all the time, but your guys' professionalism, your feedback, willing to work with all stakeholders, thank you, because you guys really are the face of the city. No matter what we decide here, I want you guys to know, like, I am honored that you guys are our face and what the work that you do as we look and discuss this policy and what we go forward with. So please know that I am very appreciative of all your hard work. So, I mean, we all have a common goal. I don't think there's one person that says we don't need more housing. We don't need more attainable housing of all types. So I always look at how do we address wrongs that we've done in the past, which it's always, you go back and you look at, I almost look at like the 2040 general plan. You look at general plans over the years, how like that fluctuation, how has it changed every 10, 15 years based off of the policies we've decided? Have those policies actually produced what we intended and what we wanted to produce? Last year, the city of Sacramento approved like an 8-year housing plan. So when we look at these, I always go back to what's the problem? Well, the problem is we don't have enough housing. We don't have enough attainable. We don't have enough affordable housing. Is this a solution to help fix that problem? And if I don't have that information in front of me, what have other jurisdictions done? And also looking holistically. If we do this, we can't do this in a silo and a vacuum. What are we doing with every other policy in the city, and how does each interact with each other? So for the housing plan, our 8-year housing plan, we needed to build 5,700 housing units a year, whether it's, low income, attainable, affordable. Last year in 2022, we built 2,300. We're not going to meet our housing goal. So ultimately, what are we doing, and are we creating any unintended consequences? Just because something sounds good doesn't mean it is good. So I want to thank my staff, because I can't do this alone, because they know how much I love data. They're looking at Portland and the feedback. Mandatory requirements led to construction being down 27%. Even the Oregon governor is urging the city to temporarily dissolve barriers to the housing problems. Seattle's mandatory affordable housing program doesn't work, and they're redoing it. San Francisco, when they put inclusionary zoning affordable housing mandates, it cut their housing production in half, and fees stalled the projects in the pipeline due to the infeasibility. LA gave 2 options. Measure JJJ had a mandate, but it also included an incentive. LA just came out, and Cal Matters did a study last year, did a report that said the incentives produced more low-income and attainable and affordable housing than the mandates. So I'll go, where are we? Carrot, stick. I think the report gave a lot of options, but what I still go back to is mandates appear to be infeasible with cities that we would look to of being very progressive. So I'm very concerned about anything that is mandatory, because city after city after city is unwinding that mandatory requirement. I know we did that as a city in 2015. And we've had good times and bad times. So one of the things, my question is Councilmember Jennings, your idea of spreading it all over, but what does that do to CADA? What does that do to downtown and the affordability and producing if, CADA is using that exemption of square foot? So again, the unintended consequences as we look at things, and are there other ways that success has been shown, especially with streamlining and incentives? If incentives have shown to work, what incentives are actually working the best? Because then that's what we can potentially implement versus saying you have to make it mandatory. I almost go to, if I always told my toddler no, I never got compliance. If I gave my toddler options, I got compliance. So I think we're all little toddlers that grow up and don't like to be told what to do. So the more we can offer incentives, I am there. And then I know in 2018, we did our impact fee reduction program. Where was that successful? I know that it has some restrictions on it, but was it successful in what it did? And are there ways that instead of just choosing one pathway, there are a couple pathways that we can look towards to doing this. So I am not for mandates. I'm for housing, I'm for incentives, but I'm also for what's worked. And too many studies are coming out showing that mandatory inclusionary housing is not working. Our data in the city shows that we've done more with incentives. So where are the carrots and how can we grow more carrots?
Thank you very much, Councilmember Kaplan. Councilmember Talamantes.
Next, you punch.
No, I'll wait till the end. I want to hear from my colleagues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty, thank you. Okay, so I want to say that I understand the frustration from stakeholders across the city on us having so many different policies in place right now, from utility fees to solid waste to our business operation tax and a lot more. You know, we're updating many policies that haven't been updated in 20 years, and in part, you know, keeping up with inflation. I also understand that federal interest rates right now are burning on the industry, and they're not in our favor. And I am worried about moving this right now with the federal interest rates being so high. But if things get better, then I definitely want to continue seeing this move forward. And this brings us to spring 2024 when we'll adopt this at the end. And I know that this project or this workshop is very healthy for the ordinance. The name of this policy is called mixed income. And from what I'm listening to right now, it sounds like we don't want mixed incomes living next to each other and prefer in lieu fees. And I'm supportive of both in lieu fees, but I'm also supportive of mixed income. I would love to see a home that's worth $700,000 next to a home that's worth $300,000. I want low-income families to benefit from the schools, from the parks, from the amenities that wealthier neighborhoods have to offer. That's important to me. And that's why on-site development, I know with math right now, with the studies, it doesn't pencil out, but I asked the development community to work with us and help us figure out what we can do to make sure that on-site affordable development is possible for the market rate industry. Like, work with us. Let us know. Let's do affordable by design. 700 square foot homes, that's fine. Let's get creative. Duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. I don't know. Let's figure it out, because I want families to be able to live together, have diversity, have different people living together. It's good for Sacramento. So for city staff, you know, if we have a list of incentives to promote this, that'd be wonderful. I know there'll be a future bond to help with affordable housing so that we have a funding source for many of these ideas will be great. But this is something that's important to me as a council member and something that I would love for people to consider. We're doing a lot of work on workforce housing, missing middle, mixed income, and streamlining housing development projects. You know, we're a pro-housing jurisdiction, and that's something to be proud of as Sacramento. But I would love to see a comprehensive report on fees that we charge per department compared to other jurisdictions. So if our city manager can get that report to us before we adopt this policy in the future, that'd be wonderful. And I do want to highlight, you know, one of the comments from Armand with Environmental Justice Coalition. And, you know, he talked about the senior on a pacemaker that is retired. And I think about all the people on fixed incomes that can't afford the rent right now and can't afford a house. And many people have 10 people living in a house. And that's the reality of Sacramento we live in. And we need to continue doing more for the workforce of Sacramento. All the people that can't afford housing right now, they work in Sacramento. They're your bus drivers. They're your social workers. They're your cashiers. They're professionals. They're psychiatrists and counselors. I have many cousins my age that can't afford a home on their own, and they're making $80,000. There's just no market for it right now. So we need more housing across all income levels because $1 million home will help that person that is ready to graduate from their $600,000 home. But we also need $300,000 homes, and we just need housing production to increase in Sacramento, but with a heavy emphasis on just affordable housing. We need affordable housing tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, well said. Mayor Pro Tem Vang.
Thanks, Mayor. So first, I just want to take this moment to thank Greta, Matt, and just Greg. Thank you so much for all your work, working with all our care holders to really get to this moment. I know it's only preliminary recommendations, and we're not really going to finalize it until next year, and really appreciate that. My colleagues and I are able to engage in full public discourse about where we are on this. I know that this proposal is not final. I think we've said that numerous times, and I really look forward to actually working with our housing leaders, developers, our community-based organization to really find common ground and a path forward. I think for me, at the end of the day, this is called a mixed income housing ordinance, right? So it's really about creating a more diverse, inclusive neighborhoods. And it's really about ensuring that when we're building developments that we have set aside units that are affordable. Literally, that's what we're having the conversation about today. I know we've built, I really appreciate Vice Mayor Guerra, because I know some of us haven't been on here longer than a few of my colleagues about just the progress that we have made. But what I will also say is that while we've made some progress, we haven't moved fast enough, at a fast enough pace. And I say that because I'm going to say the stat again, for every one person that we're able to house in the city, 3 more becomes homeless, right? And so yes, we're making progress, but we have to be more bold and courageous about how we're moving forward. And I know what we're doing while we're building more units, it's still not enough, and we're still behind. As you heard earlier from one of my colleagues, we definitely still need to get to 16,000 more affordable units in the city. And I've said this over, and I think all of us agree with this, is that housing is a human right. And just my personal opinion, I don't think it should be left to the market. I actually do think it's the responsibility of government to figure out what options and tools we have to actually address the lack of housing. I think it's the government and its private entity as well. I think it's a partnership, but saying government should not be involved is actually, for me, it's false, because it is our responsibility to take care of those that are left behind, that don't have a voice about what's happening. And so it is within the power of government. That's why the people elected us, to make sure that we fight for them, those that are voiceless, those that don't have access to housing. With all of that said, though, I'm really looking forward to conversations outside of just this chamber. I'm really looking forward to having one-on-one coffees with developers. This is my open invite to you, with advocates on the ground, to really figure out what kind of alternatives we have in addition to staff's recommendation. I also want to share, I really appreciate the briefing that I got from staff as well. And one of the questions that I asked staff was the current mixed income housing ordinance that we have now. One question I had was, how much is that generating, right? And I think, Greta, you shared with me that's about $1 million or $1 million a year? On average, right? And 1 million sounds like a lot, but it's really not a lot for us to work with. And in addition to that, it's restrictive, right? And so the in lieu fees, what it actually allows us to do is have more flexibility in terms of the type of investment we want to make on different types of housing, which I think is a powerful tool for the city. Again, I just want to reiterate that for me, this is about ensuring that we're setting aside affordable housing units. That's how it's called, a mixed income housing ordinance, right? And last week, I just want to remind folks that we took a really special vote last week, right? Figuring out how we can address the missing middle housing. And we heard from constituents, that's great, we need to do that, but who actually has access to, when we talk about middle income housing, right? And I shared with them the reason why I'm supporting that, because I saw that as one part of the larger strategy. So I see this ordinance as another part of the larger strategy when we talk about addressing affordable housing in this city. And so I just wanted to bring that back up, because last week we were all very enthusiastic about addressing this one part of the housing, the missing middle, which is very important, but it's only one part of our comprehensive strategy. And this ordinance is critical if we're really wanting to ensure that we don't leave anyone behind when we're building housing in this city. And so, again, just really want to thank staff for the recommendation. I just want to remind a few of my colleagues that I actually think some of the recommendation they propose is a really good compromise because, one, they shared a little bit. They heard some of the concerns. They shared a little bit about the phase-in and lieu fees to help developers, right? And you heard about the various steps. Really appreciate you being intentional and thoughtful about that. I also want to share about the additional incentives for on-site units to be affordable. Their staff did recommend, here are several options, that there would be additional reduction on top of the reductions that we're already giving as well, right? There's a density bonus, right? If you're not able to pencil out, are we able to build more units to help pencil out, right? So I think there are tools that staff has researched and has looked and try to figure out compromise. So I just want to say thank you for your hard work to actually get to this moment. Looking forward to the continued conversation because maybe there are other solutions and alternatives out there that maybe we have not yet heard. And so I'm really looking forward to that. But really, I think this is a great start. And just looking forward to the larger conversation, not just here, but in the community as well. I want to hear from our developers as well. I want to have coffee with you. I want to see your performa. I think a few developers have been able to show me their performa. Would love to see yours as well and figure out what we can do to support just our housing stock. So thank you so much. Really excited for this. Glad we're not voting on it tonight, even though I want to vote yes, but maybe there are some, missing alternatives that we can add into this ordinance, but I'm glad we're looking at this. And again, this is one part of the larger picture. Last week, we were all, enthusiastic about the vote last week, but it was just one part of the housing strategy. And so if you're really about making sure that we're addressing this holistically, this has got to be part of the package. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Maple, then I will speak.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just also want to appreciate staff for all the hard work on this. I had that big stack report on my desk for the last couple of weeks and really poured through it. And I know it's just, and also to our consultant, thank you so much for your work on that, because I know it's not easy to do, especially when you have a lot of people who may not always agree on even the baseline. So just being able to come up with that is really important. I also want to appreciate all of our stakeholders. I've had probably more conversations about housing this week than any week since I've been elected. And I think that's a really good thing because it's the most important issue facing our city, in my opinion, and to many of my constituents. And I've been thinking a lot about just the problem that we're trying to solve for here. One, of course, is how do we produce more affordable housing for people to live in our city? That's, of course, the key issue that almost everyone on this dais, if not everyone, has talked about. But also as it relates to the way our affordable housing is currently developed and where it came from. So, I've heard some folks talk about the current system. And, back in the 60s and the 70s, government writ large, produced housing projects that concentrated people into these large projects. And what we saw as a result of that is concentrated poverty over many generations, things that people are still not out of in this day right now. And we, I think, learned a lesson from that, which is that it's really important to have a mix of incomes. We know that that produces better opportunities and better outcomes for people. And so when we talk about, as some have mentioned, the cost of an affordable housing project versus the cost of another market rate development, I think what is often missing in the conversation is that we government said, hey, we can't just put people into these projects. We need to make sure that we're wrapping around services. We need to make sure that there's childcare, that people have transportation, that people are getting workforce development opportunities and so on. And so when we talk about the cost of an affordable housing project, it's not just the walls and the sinks and the paint. We're also talking about those services that are provided over a very long period of time in those deed-restricted units. And I know that's complicated. I don't expect the average person to know that about the project, but I think it's important to bring up in this context because we're not comparing apples to apples when we're talking about market rate versus affordable units. And I think that's a good thing because we recognize that we need to have these opportunities for folks. And so I also want to acknowledge that there are really viable concerns about the complexity and the arguably broken federal and state funding mechanisms for affordable housing projects. I cannot disagree. And I really do think that us as a city should consider taking an advocacy role in fighting for those changes at the federal and the state level because we see what's happening here in our city. It's not working. And it's not solely based on, decisions that we're making here. It's actually based more so on things that are happening at levels above us. But we can do something about that, right? We can each call our federal representatives or state representatives, and we can be a part of that change. And that's something that I plan to do. on the campaign trail, I heard loud and clear from residents that they are having trouble finding housing that they can afford and keeping housing that they can afford. When I met with Legal Services of Northern California recently, and I saw the astronomical number of evictions that have happened since the beginning of this year, more so than years in the past, that really shocked me. And then you add on top of that people are really just struggling under the rate of inflation in general. They're struggling with the rising cost of food, gas, and other goods. And so we see that many people are rent burdened and struggling. And I see that especially so in my district. And so that's one piece of the pie. And then one other piece that I think is really important because we're having this conversation not in a vacuum. There's all of these things that are happening among us is the recent research that many of us referenced just a few months ago from UCSF. It's the largest study done in 30 years on homelessness. And it was very, very clear that one of the single most important factors in homelessness in cities all around in California is the lack of affordable housing. So we're not just talking about the need for affordable housing because we're hearing it from constituents. We're seeing it because researchers are saying, hey, this is the most important issue if you want to tackle homelessness. So I think about homelessness and housing together as one. If you don't have a roof over your head, you're homeless, and that we need to make sure that we have a roof for you. And so it is the most important policy issue to us. And so I also want to acknowledge that I understand that the market conditions have changed. Like that is a very real reality that we have to address. It's been mentioned by some of my colleagues here. If it doesn't pencil out, it won't be built. I mean, that's just the facts. Especially for private market developers, they're doing this based on what makes sense, what pencils out in their pro formas, and we have to be sensitive to that. And so that's something that I'm really, want to make sure that I'm hearing from you all. I've had many conversations this week. I want to continue those as we move on. And I know that our staff are listening as well as we move forward in these conversations. It might be true that we may not return to the market that we had a year ago or 2 years ago. And I think we have to be able to address that and make sure that that's reflected in the information that we're providing and the policies that we're passing. So I do want to have those conversations. I also lastly just really wanted to uplift my colleague, Councilmember Talamantes, and her comments. I really do think that we do need to have a full sense of what we have been talking about DOU fees. We have been talking about raising certain taxes. We have been talking about impact fees and so on is what does it really mean to developers right now? And I don't think that we have a clear sense of that as not because it doesn't exist, but because I'm not a developer and I haven't had to put all those numbers together. But I really think it would be helpful as a body for us to see all of that in one place. What does it really mean? And I think that will help us better understand the market conditions. So just really want to agree with my colleagues that this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. I'm appreciative of this workshop. I think it's an important issue for us to discuss, and I really look forward to continuing conversations with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Maple. Thank you to all my colleagues, really for a really important discussion. And again, whether we skip right to a vote in the spring or whether we have some more workshop kind of discussions, I certainly think that without delay, but more robust discussion would be really valuable and important because this issue is that important. I would like to ask a question, and then I'm going to make my comments of the Kaiser Marston gentleman. Your name again, I'm sorry.
David Dozema.
David Dozema, Mr. Dozema. So you said earlier in response to Mr. Jennings, Councilmember Jennings' suggestion that a $3.54 fee imposed where it net-wise does not exist today would result, if it could be passed on to the tenant in the rental situation, would result in about a $10 increase in rent. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay. So just to extrapolate, I just want to make sure that the math is correct, that the staff recommends, of course, over time, a $10 fee per square foot fee. Does that mean that the rent increase would be triple $10 since $10 is about, give or take, triple $3.54? Are we talking about a $30 increase in rent if at some point you did the full $10 fee on a, as you say, an apartment that rents for, oh my God, $2,700 a month?
So I had asked, my $10 was a little bit of a round number, so the math
We're not holding it to the penny here. I'm trying to get order of magnitude.
So I had estimated the $10 level at about roughly 40 some dollars. As if the developer were able to pass that on to the tenant, 40 some dollars in rent increase would be enough to absorb it. That was
Said
my-
$10. For the full $10.
For the full
For the full
$10.
$10, it'd be about $40.
Correct,
Okay,
yeah,
fair
yes,
enough.
yes.
That's close enough for government work. Very good. Okay, yes. Thank you. That gives us, that gives me the approximate argument. Okay, so I want to just make a couple of comments and see if I could provide some direction myself as the mayor. Obviously, one vote, but some thoughts after listening to all my colleagues and the public. First, just sort of a philosophical statement, which is, you know, the challenge of democracy, really, and especially in modern times, is how we as a city pursue a values-based agenda and actually achieve demonstrable progress towards that agenda. And I think our values are all very, very clear. We want the economic renaissance of the city to continue, albeit interrupted by COVID, but we want that to continue. And we are rightfully focused on inclusion and affordability for everyone. There are too many people hurting who can't afford a place to live. And that is fundamental to our ethos as a city. The question is, how do we achieve it? That's all we're debating here tonight. Now, I agree that I think Councilmember Talamantes really said something in a way that really struck me, and I think it struck many of us. And that is the in lieu, and you didn't say it this way, so it's my paraphrase. To me, the in lieu fee, regardless of what it is a poor substitute for ensuring that units, lower income units, moderate income units are built in the same place as market rate units. Because as you said, and others have said, look at our history. We have a history of segregating people by class and by race. And darn it, we better be purposeful about turning that around. And so economic integration matters. As much as I love the people who do affordable housing, you know, with great reputations, and know how to put the financing together and all that, it is not sufficient to hand them a bunch of money, which, by the way, is never enough money, stack all the financing together as we do, throw in a little MHSA and throw in a little of this and that, and hopefully you compete for the tax credits, is what SHRA does very, very well, and then build a big complex in one place that's exclusive of integrating people of different income levels, and yes, different races and ethnicities and genders and sexual orientation and all the rest, people living together. That's our Sacramento value. And so this policy had better integrate people of all walks of life living together. So thank you for really putting the finest of fine point on that. Not that there isn't a place for a fee, and as I understand it, that may be required under law, some form of option in terms of the in lieu fee. So that's our values. And yes, there is a real question brought forward by the development community and by others as well that raises the question, how do we pay for it? How do we pay for it? Now, you know, I gave a State of the City address back in August, 3 of them actually, and the last one was to put forward at the CADA property, 1717 S Street, suggested that we put forward a Measure A that subs out the big roadway expansion and instead substitutes in affordable housing, along with transit and safe and complete streets. That is the right idea, and its time will come. I'm not sure that 2024, frankly, is the year. That the voters are in a bit of a sour mood. Times are tough, and the world is a little bit fragile. And I don't know whether 2024, in fact, I do know. I don't think 2024 is the year, but that doesn't mean that I will not produce a template, which I will, for my successor and my successors, all of you, and the community to take and to use it, borrow it, steal from it, take it word for word, whatever future leadership chooses to do, because we need the public revenue. We need it for housing. If we don't have a countywide or a citywide affordable housing trust fund, we're never going to meet the aggressive numbers that our regional housing needs assessment says we need, and that we know we all need. And so then there's the question of the developer. Should the developer pay for some of this responsibility? And philosophically, I believe the answer is yes, but only if the market conditions allow for it. And right now, I am concerned, just as I think some of my colleagues expressed, that the market conditions are going to are so bad. 10% construction interest, the high interest rates in general, the uncertainty in the economy, now state budget deficits, potential local budget deficits, that I worry, and I think we should all worry, that if we impose a requirement now that is not doable, that our best intentions will result in less production across the board. I think that's valid and real. And, not but, I see Mr. Vignoki sitting back there. Okay, there he is. And you actually, and I know it was a bit controversial, whatever, I know it was a close vote, but I'm thinking about the Grace Project. And what did you bring forward? You brought forward a proposal that said without any public subsidy, that you would produce a significant percentage or a certain percentage of 80 to 120 workforce units. That's what you did. And why wouldn't we come back here, staff and colleagues, with a start that says we will impose an on-site requirement for 80 to 120? Why wouldn't we consider that? We already have a developer that's already considering that. And then, because we can't and shouldn't ignore low and very low income housing, we cannot, maybe the proposal then is to trigger that requirement over time as market conditions improve. Now, how do you objectively determine that market conditions have improved? I don't want to suggest the answer here tonight, but I would suggest that all of the care holders working together, not just the developers, but the Housing Alliance and others, and the staff could work together on defining what that objective trigger could be for a low and very low income site requirement to be part of the ordinance. And by the way, by then, and I know we're talking years, but it doesn't have to be forever, maybe the political conditions are better so that we can pass a citywide or countywide affordable housing trust fund that allows for a genuine public-private partnership. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We could get started here. We could get started with 80 to 120. We could trigger forward a low and lower income requirement. On the fee issue, I mean, I think we have to we should continue the discussion, but I'm surprised in maybe a positive way that the $3.54, which Councilmember Jennings suggests, only involves $10 a month. I mean, I'm not trying to be, you know, insensitive about every dollar here, but it's only $10 a month, right? So maybe there's some room there on the in lieu fee in the interim. So there's a potential direction as we consider how to do this. You know, government, and I remember my time in state government, does triggers all the time. So we do, budget triggers, right? And I accept the argument that now is not the time to impose more regulation on the development community, because I think we might hurt ourselves despite our good and best intentions, but that doesn't mean you should be off the hook as the market conditions get better. We just have to define what that criteria is, both on the fee side, although maybe we start with something like what Councilmember Jennings suggested, but there needs to be site requirements here because that's economic integration, and that's our highest value in this city. People live together, people work together, we're one community, we're all Kings fans. You know, we're all in it together, okay? That's it. Those are my comments. Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes the workshop, and good work, staff. Thank you very much. Okay? Yeah. Members, that concludes the agenda for this evening. We do have council comments on items that are not on the agenda, so let's take that.
Council comments first and then city manager's report?
Why don't we take council comments and city manager's report first? Yes. Councilmember Valenzuela.
Thank you. We are racing towards our toy distribution day at Leotada Floyd Elementary on December 16th. I hope my colleagues will help us make sure that we get a toy for every single one of the hundreds of kids we plan to serve between the ages of 0 and 18. If folks in the public want to contribute, you can bring them to City Hall. You can even call our office if you want to be super generous, and we might swing by and grab things from you. But either way, I hope folks will participate. The toy distribution is on December 16th, and we will accept toys up until the 15th. Finally, for the city manager, I've noticed on the police department's website that there's a transparency page that includes a website for the police commission. And I've also noticed that some of that information up there isn't the most recent, like recommendations that they've posted. So I'm wondering if maybe your team would work with the commission to update that information, because that can be the most recent.
Sure,
version.
I'll follow up with the team to make sure it reflects the most updated information.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Let's keep going. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Mayor. I just have 2 events to announce. Metalites in the View is happening next Thursday from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Sam and Bonnie Pennell Community Center. If you don't know the address, it's 2450 at Meadowview Road. But come and experience the magic season with all of our incredible Pennell staff. There'll be holiday lights, engaging activities, music, giveaways, and so much more. This event is open to everyone of all ages. Team Heart and Hustle will be there, and so come join us at the Pennell Community Center for Meadow Lights. And then also want to take this moment to also let folks know about a toy giveaway hosted by the Henley and Harris Foundation partners. It's going to be happening on Monday, December 18th from 2 to 6 p.m. at the Mack Road Valley High Community Center at 7833 Center Parkway. There's going to be toys, coats, hot food, and lots of fun. And so really encouraging the community to come out to those 2 events. And that's it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vang. Let's move this over to Councilmember Talemantes.
To any staff watching this meeting right now, we have our door decorating contest tomorrow at 11 o'clock. So it's going to be the battle of the council members and the mayor. So hope you guys join us. And we have our first Santa in Natomas night on Friday on, December 8th. And I'm really excited to continue this beautiful tradition.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Talemantes. Councilmember Kaplan.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. This Friday, it's going to be nice and cool, but come out. I am doing my walk the talk at 9 a.m. at North Natomas Regional Park, so come join me for a 2-mile walk around our park and ask me any questions your little heart desires. And then for District 1, for my first, we are having Santa's coming through on the fire trucks with Intercom Public Safety. We will be out and about December 8th, this Friday, Saturday, December 9th. And then on the 10th, come join us, one and all, everybody in the city. We are throwing a Winter Wonderland and Christmas Bazaar at the North Natomas Regional Park, which will include free ice skating. So come on down, hang out with Santa, and do some shopping for stocking stuffers and support small businesses. See you then.
Thank you, Councilmember Kaplan. Councilmember Maple.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. A couple of events to announce. This Thursday at 9 a.m., we'll be doing our walk with Councilmember Maple at the Oak Park Community Center. So we walk with our seniors. We usually do about 2 miles around Oak Park. It's really fun. It's a great opportunity to get moving and also to talk with us. It's a great way for me to hear issues from the community. And so I do invite you out. That'll be at the Oak Park Community Center. And then also at the Oak Park Community Center this Friday from 5:30 p.m. until 8 p.m. is our Keepin' Oak Park Warm that's done through YPSI. And so they'll be handing out warm clothes, games, hygiene products, and blankets, and more. So that's while supplies last. So please try to get there early, 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Oak Park Community Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Maple. Councilmember Jennings.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd like to invite you and your families this Thursday, December the 7th, for a festive fire truck Santa event at the William Land Park Golf Course from 4:30 to 7 p.m. It's presented by the Land Park Community Association. It's going to take place at William Land Park Golf Course, and there's going to be lots of fun activities for kids to learn a little bit about golf and have a great time. And Santa's not coming by himself. He's going to bring his elves, courtesy of the fire department. They'll be on hand to take photos, gather wish lists from the kids, and just have a great time putting and chipping on the golf course. The Land Park Community Association is excited to host a complimentary cocoa bar and cookie station. And Mulligan's Cafe is also there to purchase food for purchase. As part of this event, we are collecting canned goods to support the Sacramento Food Bank. Your participation will make this event festive, a festive gathering for all involved. So I hope to see you there again Thursday, December the 7th from 4:30 to 7:30. And Vice Mayor, my second announcement is I'd like to adjourn in memory of the young man who went to the Kings game last night and had a cardiac arrest. And even though all the help was given in order to help him to maintain his life, he was not able. They were not able to save him. His name is Greg Flores Breedlove, and his mother Janet Flores. We know that just from the paper and information, but just want to adjourn in memory of him. He was there to see the Kings win and to light the beam. And unfortunately, we didn't win, but the beam will shine on him forever because he's such a loyal Kings fan. And while we are sorry to see him not be with us anymore, our prayers and thoughts go out to the family.
Thank you, Councilmember Jennings. We will adjourn in memory of Greg Flores Breedlove when that time comes. Mayor Steinberg.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We have not adjourned in memory of the individual I want to talk about today, maybe because he was so prominent and big and important that we were waiting for the right time. And I know that sometime after the first of the year, there will be a formal memorial service for him. But I just felt funny and feel funny letting so much time go by without mentioning in public the passing of former mayor and assembly member Phil Eisenberg, who was a giant in this city and in this community and a personal mentor to me. Phil was, as I said, the council member, mayor, assembly member, chair of the Assembly Judiciary Committee, high up in the leadership of the state assembly, and he rose to all those heights because he had a sublime intellect and an ability to solve problems and to see the different points of view from stakeholders, and he loved Sacramento. I mean, in so many ways in his life, he contributed, including in his post-legislative years. He was one of the great art patrons of Sacramento, did so much for the Verge and so much else. And he and his wife, Marilyn, are really important people and leaders in our community. And there'll be more to say about Phil in the right setting, at the right kind of memorial service. But I just wanted to say it publicly at the city council that this community lost a true giant in the passing of Phil Eisenberg too suddenly now a couple of months ago. And I just want us all to remember him tonight and over the holiday season, and to send our love to Marilyn, who his wife and partner for God, how many decades, and a great leader in her own right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, want to send my love and heartfelt thoughts to Marilyn. I got a chance to know Phil and Marilyn when I was a student at Sac State, and I would have never have known at that time, you know, the giant that he was in the political world, and that Marilyn was. They would come and visit and support all the student performances, all of the musical performances. And interestingly, you know, I got a chance to sit next to them very often at them. And when I first got to know them personally, was after the passing of Mayor Joe Cerna. And they, particularly Marilyn and Phil, graciously organized and hosted the recognition of Mayor Cerna at that time. And in that time afterwards, working in the legislature, watching both of them and Phil, and how they mentored other people, you know, and never once just about them, the humbleness that he had, you know, always taking on sometimes the executive fellows and building leadership with such a positive way. I credit him to my first run for council and giving me advice in troubled times and difficult times and times where I didn't know where to go. You know, he took on one of the biggest challenges in California, you know.
Water.
Exactly.
Water.
Yeah. What is it? Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And I would say that he said, I'm going to take it on, our local Sacramento.
Yes.
And sure enough, you know, we needed somebody like Phil Eisenberg to help us, to help our state on one of the fundamentals of life, which is water.
He wrote the big water bills I did when I was pro tem. He wrote them. So if you loved them, I did them. If you don't, Phil.
It was Phil, you know, yes. But I do want to say that I know if we're adjourned in memory today, but maybe even better, do a more proper adjourned in memory, proper adjourned in memory later. I do want to give, during this time of the holiday, express my heartfelt support for Marilyn and, you know, the time and dedication they both have given to our great city. So with that, and moving on to one announcement, I want to thank our city staff, or particularly our park staff, throughout the city. They are working in our community centers. They're working at all of these events to bring cheer at a time during the holidays. No different than in District 6 in the Coloma Community Center. Our staff is out there. They'll be celebrating Snow Much Fun at the Coloma Center starting at 6:30 this Thursday. It's a great event. We've had it annually every year. We hope people will come by, but it doesn't happen without all of our city employees who come together to try to provide a positive opportunity for our young kids and our working families. Also want to highlight this Thursday at noon, the monthly Safety on Stockton meeting. This is where our business improvement districts, both the city and the county, come together with our code officers to look at issues and address some of the challenges that we may have, whether it be illegal dumping or other criminal activity, and to improve the safety and on our long 4.5-mile Stockton Boulevard. With that, leading into our next report, and maybe I'll ask about this. Mr. City Manager, I think our next item on the agenda, Madam Clerk, is the City Manager's report on the incident command and the statistics. With that, Mr. Lara, I hope I could also recognize that we need to address the conditions over at Tahoe Park that occurred over the weekends, over the last couple of days as well. But with that, Mr. Lara.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mario Lara, Assistant City Manager. These are your weekly statistics from the Incident Management Team. I want to remind you that a dashboard is now available. It's on the website, and these figures are available up there. So this is for the week of November 27th through December 3rd. And again, response activities fall under the three areas you see there, the outreach, the enforcement, and the cleanup. There were 216 new calls for services that were received. 347 pending calls were closed during the last week, with 153 compliance actions taken. Over 909,000 pounds of trash were removed, with 1,000 needles picked up. This is a more detailed breakdown of that activity that occurred. And then it has a year-to-date figure at the bottom there that you see highlighted there. 42,000 homeless services-related calls have been responded to since January. Again, that's prior to the IMT, the incident management team, being stood up. But those are the figures that we have, and over 10 million pounds of trash removed, with 48,000 needles year-to-date removed. This slide talks a little bit about the outreach efforts, which resulted in 143 individuals being newly enrolled into HMIS and 46 referrals to our coordinated access system. There is, however, a significant waiting list for individuals and families through the shelter placement system. We do, however, do our rapid placements at our OEC and Miller Park. There were 42 rapid placements this last week. As of this morning, we had 10 units, 5 tents, and 5 trailers at Miller Park Safe Camping, and 5 spaces available at Outreach and Engagement Center. I believe some of those have been taken up even today that we're talking about. And here we have some stats on the enforcement or compliance activities. Impact teams visited 13 locations and closed 347 311 calls for services. These are compliance generally with the sidewalk obstruction, excess storage, or critical infrastructure that we're focusing on. Code enforcement tagged 176 vehicles and towed 70 vehicles in the last week, and park rangers responded to 69 calls for services at park and bike trails. And I understand the concern about Tahoe Park, and yes, we do have an individual that is staying there and that is causing some vandalism to the restroom that is there. We are working on that. The IMT, through the IMT, we're going to support park rangers. They're stretched very thin. You know, we only have about a dozen rangers or so to cover the entire parks, but we are going to work with our impact teams as well to give them some support so that we can address that situation. And we're also working with our city attorney's office to try to figure out how to address that. We have gone out to Tahoe Park to do some engagements, and it is a work in progress, Vice Mayor, and we are going to get that individual better situated. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Laura. I appreciate that also, and appreciate the work with the DOU that's beginning to happen on Morrison Creek as well. With that, Madam Clerk, I think that moves us on to public comment on matters not on the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. I have 14 speakers for public comment matters not on the agenda. I'll read off a couple. Lambert, Jared Landreth, Coco Cozella, Robert Copeland.
Mr. Davis.
My name is Lambert Davis. I'm going to put this here. It's really amazing. That's why I came tonight, because I figured you wouldn't acknowledge some wonderful teenage accomplishments. You should be mentioning this, Mr. Lololi. Grant High School just won the Northern California Championship last weekend. The weekend before, they won the championship in Sacramento. Okay, and no mention of it tonight. And it also says here that what I think should happen this year, last year, which they won the state, they should get summer jobs. They shouldn't have these photo ops. That's not going to help their parents and their grandparents. Give them jobs. Also, the Grant Drumline. You see this hat? They gave this to me last year, and they were right there. I was there too. Our families were there to root for this. We hear a lot about the Kings. We hear a lot about the Sacramento Republic, but they don't win championships. It's very difficult to win championships. And these are teenagers, and they should be rewarded. And that's why I came, because I figured people wouldn't do it. And the city manager's office should put more money into what I just said. This is a $1.5 billion budget, and we're sitting up here listening to things about homeless and needles. You should be spending more money in Del Paso Heights. These are young people that are at a disadvantage, and they're making this city look great. And it's because we know how to win. And I'm going to end with this. To the Bay and Back cheesecakes, we're getting ready to follow right behind these youngsters, and we're going to flood the state of California with cheesecakes.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and congratulations to
Thank you for your
the
comments.
successes.
Mr. Landreth, and then after that, I'd like to have Meg White and Bobby Wooten. I want to be conscientious. We have youth in our audience that probably need to get home to bed before school tomorrow.
Okay, well, I'm back here again, and I'm going to keep coming back here until we figure this problem that we have out at Altos Avenue with the homeless tents that are out there. There's, as far as I know, the police told me that there was 100. I thought there was 46. But there's 100 tents down this trail. It's in front of homeowners' houses. A lot of the people out there are upset about that because their property values are going down because of it. There's a lot of things going on out there. There's a couple of tents out there that are doing drugs out of it. Some are doing prostitution out of it. There are people out there splicing into the power grids, the power boxes that are out there. One guy that I had to call the police on had a machete. He's out there hacking up the trees that are to put up their tents. And then also, I got pictures of all this stuff. I don't really want to give you the pictures and show you because it's pretty disgusting. I really don't want to show that to you. But I mean, if you don't understand what's going on out there, I invite everybody to go out there and take a look. To me, I was shocked when I first came out there, and I just have only been here for 4 months. And it's just gotten completely worse. When they did move the ARCO, and they did clear out that section, those people moved over right in front of our houses. From stop sign to stop sign, we have 16 tents. And it's pretty terrible. There's so much trash out there. It's just, it's out of hand. It really is. And I just don't know when the Rangers are supposed to come out. I heard that they're coming to our section next, but I haven't heard anything. I haven't gotten any call back from the Rangers to see what is going on out there. But when I called 311, they said, well, we're working on it. That's the next area we have to go to. We know that it's a huge problem out there. So I just want to let you know that that's still going on. And so when I have better news to tell you, then I'll be happy. But that's where we're at
Thank you for your
right now.
comments.
Thank
Our
you.
next speaker is Meg White, then Bobby Wooten.
Good evening. I'm Meg White, and I'm here on behalf of Kaylin Footman and her family. Kaylin is a second grade teacher who was violently arrested and jailed for 10 days with no access to friends, family, or her attorney during a mental health crisis. While Kaylin is currently out of jail and working on recovering from her physical injuries and additional mental trauma she endured during her arrest and incarceration, she's now facing 4 felonies and a misdemeanor for having a mental health crisis. This is yet another example of the need for fairly paid mental health professionals to be available 24/7 for mental health emergencies. There's so much talk about restorative justice, about building trust between the community and the police, but now we need action to back up all of that talk. Ms. Footman shouldn't have been taken to a hospital, not a jail. Ms. Footman should have been focused on recovering, not fighting a legal battle. We have the opportunity to stand together and do our best to do the right thing. What message are we sending out to the community that calling for mental health support means violence or incarceration? That calling for mental health means more criminalization and can be a call that actually ends your life. Councilmember Kaplan, I contacted you several times trying to get information since Natomas Unified is in your district, and my questions have been ignored, so I'm here again to ask you, will you stand up for Black educators? Mayor Steinberg, I'm also here to ask you specifically, will you champion for Kaylin? We need all of you to join the community by writing letters for her defense team to give to the district attorney as well as the judge. Kaylin Footman, when looking for professional support when she had a mental health breakdown, she was denied. Her family rushed by her side to continue to seek mental health support, trying every option that Sacramento had to offer, and they were denied. Kaylin was further traumatized. She was left battered, bruised, and even missing parts of her nail beds. Please do the right thing. Stand up for justice, stand up for educators, stand up for mental health, and stand up for Kaylin Footman.
Thank you for your comments. Bobby Wooten, then Coco Kozella.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Bobby Wooten, and I am here on behalf of Kaylin Footman. As my friend just stated, she had a mental breakdown, you guys, during work. She reached out for help. Her boss did not give her the help that she needed. As her family, we called 988, we called 911, and all we wanted to do was get her admitted to a mental facility. To no prevail. Like she said, she was arrested, you guys. Instead of being hospitalized, she was criminalized. This is somebody who is a second grade teacher. She's been teaching our youth for 8 years or more, you guys. We have entrusted her. So if she has had a mental breakdown, it has to have been something that triggered that. Bigger than that, yes, she was totally mistreated in jail. We tried to get Sheriff Cooper to get her released. They would not even accept our calls, or, well, they wouldn't accept our complaints. They stated that his office received so many complaints that they don't even give them to him anymore. Okay? She works for the Natomas Unified School District. She is my child's godmother. She is a black woman who loves her students, and she was mistreated. Once again, we are asking that you all please stand with us, write letters to the judge, the DA, and get her charges dropped. Just like you guys are serving our community, it could be any one of you that suffer a mental breakdown for any reason. And do you guys deserve to go to jail and not be able to speak to your family, friends, loved ones, or even your attorney? So once again, if you don't know her case, please Google it, follow it, and get her charges dropped. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Coco Cocozella.
Thank you. Coco Cocozella, resident of District 4. I wanted to talk about some of the reports I've been reading about the usage of citations for some of the violations that the homeless are perpetrating. I want to set a little context, and this is not necessarily an actionable discussion for me, but just sort of like a perspective, which is I don't think it's a balanced approach. Neither do I think a balanced approach is not doing anything. As a resident, I am definitely sick of it. I'm also sick about it. So I'm sick in my heart about it. And it's a conflicting set of feelings about it. But I want to say, in terms of context, remember, people who live day to day in a reactive, beyond stressful environment don't see potentially civil accountability as a high priority, and they may not understand what consequence we're asking them to assimilate. So I'll port this over to a discussion about priorities. With every little or large initiative we do, why don't we think about how we can incorporate solving these issues little by little, chip away? For instance, this kiosk idea. Why don't we add a functionality to kiosk where we can check in with our homeless community and let them check in back with us? Design around everything we do some type of system that incorporates a solution. I don't think working on fixing it all at once is going to do it. Let's chip away at it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Robert Copeland, Charles Faust, David Drillinger, then Ryan Massino.
As an ACE member, we're fighting for tenant rights and better public transportation here in Sacramento County and statewide. So I heard Lisa Kaplan wants more RT bus service in her district. I agree. And any other city council member, if they want better public transportation service, we're going to fight for that. And that includes the rest of the county also. As far as the tenant protection program ending soon, you want to check in with AB 1482, passed a few years ago by Assembly Member David Chu, and Senate Bill 567 by Senator DeRosa, which closed a few loopholes in the prior bill. We need people that housed. We need lower rent. We need more housing being built. We also need go after the slumlords. Because I was canvassing for ACE at a housing complex. Every tenant we talked to, except for 3, had problems. And I'm talking severe problems. Black mold, sewage problems, plumbing problems. The landlord was, people were getting ticketed for parking when they actually lived there, and they contacted their manager, did everything right. I'm going to end my conversation now.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Charles Faust. I have 8 more speakers. So Charles, then David, then Ryan Masano, then Keon Bliss.
Good evening. Sorry. I think it'd be beneficial to move the city manager's report with the incident management team stuff to earlier in the meeting. It seems strange that it comes after everything else, and it has a lot of useful information for you guys and the public, really. So it'd be nice if that happened maybe before the consent calendar, after the consent calendar. Seems strange that it's placed after you guys have comments on everything. The other thing I want to talk about is the what happened with the county and approving the Stockton Boulevard stuff this morning is kind of, fuck it, I'm done.
Thank you for your comments. David Drellinger, Ryan Masano, Keon Bliss, then Coral May.
Good evening. I'm David Drellinger. I'm a resident of District 6. I'm also running for the District 6 council position in the upcoming election. I'm a recent graduate of Lincoln Law School, and I'm studying for the bar right now. And in my studies, I was studying constitutional law, and I wanted to bring something to your attention about the takings clause in the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. That's also in the California Constitution. There's 4 elements. It forbids a governmental taking of private property for a public purpose or use without just compensation. I'd like to apply this to earlier on in the evening where $720,000 was met out to Forensic Clean. Forensic Clean is effectively acting as the boots on the street to go out and pick up that 990,000 or however many pounds of garbage that was in the city's report this evening. A lot of those are tents, they are personal belongings, they are sleeping bags that are being taken and thrown into the dump. This is when you pay $720,000, when you stamp that off and that expenditure is fine, then you're effectively sending out boots on the ground to take personal property. And the question is personal property, does that qualify under the U.S. Constitution's definition of private property? And it's been expanded in the case Horn v. USDA that personal property absolutely qualifies under the takings clause. So you can take their personal property, but you have to offer them just compensation. So we're talking about thousands of pounds, thousands of tents, thousands of people's personal properties and their belongings that have been taken. And they've been taken unconstitutionally because you have a budget and you sent people out to do it. So I think there should be some accountability and we should pay them for their personal property. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ryan Masano, Keon Bliss, then Coral May.
Is this visible?
It needs to be on the pad. Yeah. Please proceed.
So we should have 3 to 5 minutes at the very beginning of this meeting. It's very clear of what you think of everybody in this audience because you save us for dead last. The mayor walks out which is totally bogus. So we should be very first. We should have the time to speak because we have a lot to say. And I could tell you right now, some of the solutions for the city, if I was allowed to speak for 6 months or speak for 6 months.
We have.
This is what you said, Ms.
Madam
Kaplan.
Clerk, there's been a point taken.
Can you
hold a minute
Can you,
here.
no, can you please put that right back up? It's free speech. Your country was decimated by communism. You ought to know better. You don't understand who's behind this.
Point of order. Government Code Section 5494.3 provides that members of
Mindy,
the public may address the
stow
city
it. You've been
council
doing
on
this for
any items
months,
when
and
the
you're
subject matter
way out of
jurisdiction
order.
of the
You just
legislative
want to
body.
protect the people who are
Please
behind
proceed
all
if you
these
have comments
problems.
under the jurisdiction of the city
When
of
some of us
Sacramento.
talk about who's
Please
behind the
proceed
money,
if you have an item with the jurisdiction of Sacramento.
it's entirely within the jurisdiction of Sacramento.
Please proceed.
Sure. So this is a constant attempt to silence those of us who criticize who's behind the money. You know you're over the target when you start catching flack. And this response, this is why the 19th Amendment needs to be repealed, because women are too emotional to handle the truth. They can't handle it. That's right, I said it. That's right, I said it. And for the men, and this is, and the opposition I'm getting, and this applies to the city, we have 5 council members who are women.
Make your comments germane to the
They
jurisdiction of
are
the city.
germane. We have 5 council members. It's very germane. So we are run by emotions which are not based on facts. And women are incapable of dealing with logic and reason as men are. That's a fact. Every honest woman acknowledges that. And for the men who don't know that, I'm sorry, you're like a woman.
Yeah, okay.
And next speaker is Keon Bliss.
Sorry, not sorry to shit on those people like that. Yeah, really want to point out a couple things that came up during off agenda, which was one of which the Kaylin Footman case. Just to point out that the Police Review Commission received a letter about Kaylin Footman's treatment, both at Sac PD and Sac Sheriff, that we asked for more information on and are currently looking for. But wanted to point out that there are 14 out of the 146 recommendations, actually, I'm sorry, 13 out of the 146 recommendations that the Police Review Commission has put out since 2018 that deal with mental health crisis response, at least 3 of which call for the city to sustainably fund alternative to 911, which includes community-based mental health crisis response programs, which the Department of Community Response was originally billed to be. So just wanted to name that for the public record. But I also wanted to bring to the attention matters of the council rules of procedures, which I've been noticing since I've been here since the Law and Legislation Committee meeting, that the clerk's staff have been not accepting speaker slips after the public comment period begins, which, based on my read of the council rules of procedures updated in March, states that after the first speaker concludes, no speaker slips will be accepted in the chambers. Or actually, I'll read the full thing. Members of the public in chambers wishing to speak to the legislative body must submit to the city clerk a completed speaker slip indicating the agenda item or matters on the agenda they wish to address. Members of the public participating via teleconference wishing to speak must do so before the item is called. And then after that, it's after the speaker concludes. No speaker slip shall be inserted. And I've been denied at least once today.
Thank you for your
from
comments. Your
speaking.
time is complete.
So I really want
Thank you
some
for your
clarification.
comments. Your time is complete.
Thank you for your comments,
Our next
Commissioner
speaker is
Bliss.
Coral May, Larissa Wells, then Willie Mincy.
Hello, my name is Coral May, and I'm from Capital College and Career Academy, a new founded high school in the Del Paso area. Today, I would like to briefly talk about the abandoned buildings in North Sacramento. While Del Paso Boulevard is not particularly close to home for me, I still see the effects the abandoned buildings have on the Del Paso area. The abandoned buildings in North Sacramento attract homeless people and the environment surrounding them. People dump trash and graffiti the buildings, and no one does anything about it. Letting these once nice buildings fall into various states of despair gives the impression that the government and local law enforcement doesn't care. And if their own government doesn't care, why should they? Within a 1-mile walking walk from my school, we were able to see at least 20 abandoned buildings and just how bad it is making the neighborhood look. This ordinance not being followed can also lead to other things, such as more unhoused individuals, crimes, and fires. When comparing North Sacramento to East Sacramento, it is quite the reality check. In North Sacramento, there are upwards of 20 abandoned buildings, and to be frank, this is very disappointing compared to East Sacramento. Many kids in East Sacramento may go their entire childhood without seeing an abandoned building, while in North Sacramento, seeing an abandoned building is a daily occurrence for many. We want to be part of the change. What can we do to help you guys make our community a better place? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Larissa Wells, then Willie Mincy, then Cliff Valencia will be our final speaker.
Hi, good evening now. I want to try to make this as quick as possible. While I understand a plight of a lot of what people are saying, what I would like to emphasize is this fact. Should I wait? Okay.
No, go ahead. They're going to connect the students with the appropriate people.
Of course they are. So what I wanted to say was there are over 16,000 affordable housing units in the arena. Let me say this. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree. I am an urban planner. I am a housing policy analyst now, okay? And I understand exactly what's in the housing elements, how to read them, how to dissect them, much of which a lot of committees or communities rather do not know. And perhaps if you could have someone like myself that would be able to go in and break down things, perhaps we could have more of a legitimate and leveled analysis when it comes time to building these units or having these units built. I also want to say this. It seems clear to me that I used to be a planner for the city of Oakland, and it seems to me that Sacramento is following the playbook of the city of Oakland. And while that is commendable, and I do clearly understand that the city of Sacramento needs to have revenue in order to develop a housing trust fund so that they could build affordable housing. With that 16,000 in the arena, only 1,900 are in the pipeline. There were a little over 8,000 for moderate income, but 15,000 in the pipeline. So that seems quite unbalanced. And let me say this again. I am quite educated. I live in an area that I cannot afford simply because of all of the deductions for my retirement and things like that. In some places, it would be a pretty decent salary. Here in Sacramento, within the past 3 years that I've been here, rent has doubled. I can't afford it. What am I and others in my building, other state workers, going to do? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Willie Mincy, then Cliff Valencia.
Willie Mincy. Anyway, I probably have not been to a council meeting. I think I stopped in last week in 30 years or whatever. But anyway, I can say here, I'm really impressed in what you guys do. And I sit here and listen intensely. And so I could say my hats are off to the council. But anyway, I didn't come for that. But I just came in regard to, I had a concern in regard to groundwater cleanup. And I know the north area, we have a tremendous number of groundwater cleanup sites. And groundwater cleanup sites cost a lot of money to clean up, millions of dollars. And I've been involved in one of them that was next to my property. But anyway, I came to say is what I said about a year and a half ago, and that it takes a lot of resources to be involved in groundwater cleanup. But a year and a half ago, when I was talking to the Councilman Lowy, I asked him the question, why don't the city just clean the property up? And the reason I ask that is that we're inundated with groundwater cleanup sites, and especially like over in the Swanson district. You know, the city has a well right next to a groundwater cleanup site. That's going to be an issue, but what I found is that really the city has not been really actively participating in those groundwater cleanups, because I asked the regulator, did they get a comment, when the closure came out in regard to their well 120, did the city have a comment? He said no. And so, but anyway, my point only is that, for the sake of North Sacramento, the city needs to, I'm not saying you don't, but that's what he said, just take a more active role, because, we're depressed, it's a depressed community, and having contaminated sites makes it very difficult, and so I would ask the city to look into helping us clean up the North Sacramento area. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Cliff Valencia. And Cliff is our final speaker on this item.
Good evening. I'm back again. I was here last month speaking on fentanyl awareness, and I'm here again because I never got a response from you guys. I never got an answer on what you guys are doing to provide resources for people that are addicted to fentanyl. As I told you guys, I recently got out of federal prison, and I'm here again. I'm asking you guys, I'm seeking the resources. I just started a nonprofit organization. It's called the Isaiah Michael Foundation, and our mission is to target our youth in our schools. Back when I was growing up in the 90s, there was a DARE program that would come and speak about drugs and gangs and stuff, and we don't have that kind of program that is targeting our youth now. The reason that program was unsuccessful was because we had a whole bunch of officers coming in and trying to target our children, our youth. So now, my mission is to go to schools to speak about fentanyl and the awareness, about gangs, about the choices that they need to make so they can better their lives and make better choices in their life. Me and my wife, she was here last week as well, and we go out and we feed the homeless. We pass out Narcan to the homeless, and we speak to people, and we put up flyers of awareness to show, just to promote awareness, and I'm asking you guys if you guys can provide me with the right resources that can help me get this organization, going so we can help our youth so they can make better choices, so they don't end up in prison. So, I don't only want to target our youth, I want to target their parents as well, because, whatever choices the parents do, it affects our children. So
Thank you for
I
your
just
comments.
seek for you guys' help.
Mr. Valencia, Assistant City Manager Lara is involved at our fentanyl working group, and so he'll talk to you outside of chambers here. Madam Clerk?
Vice Mayor, that concludes the business of the council this evening.
Great, thank you. Thank you, members of the council. We are going to adjourn in the memory of Greg Flores Breedlove. We are adjourned at 8:19 p.m. Thanks, everyone, for your time.